My name is Michael.
My name is Mila.
I'm Katel.
My name is Laura.
Hello, my name is Gabriel.
My name is Jilly.
I'm Stefan.
My name is Pamela DiCE.
I am Natalia.
I'm Alex. I'm Natalia's husband.
My name is Neve.
My name is Mia Linden.
I'm Kaylee.
My name is Marcus.
My name's Ali Stant.
I'm Cécile Duchesne.
I'm Patricia Rzadkowska.
My name is Andy.
When I was diagnosed with cancer, I was 29 years old. It was stage 3 colon cancer.
I'm 13 years old and I was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer when I was 26 years old.
I'm 44 and I was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer at 40.
My husband, Guillaume, was diagnosed with metastatic colorectal cancer in 2021. He passed away last year.
I'm 22 years old. I was 21 years old when I got diagnosed with biliary tract cancer and multiple liver metastases.
I was diagnosed at age 47 with stage 4 bowel cancer. At the time, I was given 3 months to live.
I was diagnosed with rectal cancer when I was 34 years old.
I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when I was 46 years of age, and I am 52 years old now.
At age 33, I was diagnosed with stage 4 gastric cancer.
In February 2022, I was diagnosed at the age of 44 with metastatic colorectal cancer.
I have Lynch syndrome, which is something that I inherited from my mother's side. I was diagnosed with colon cancer at the age of 37. Now I'm 58.
I was diagnosed with colorectal cancer at the age of 30.
I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2007, age 41.
I was diagnosed with colorectal cancer in 2019. It was stage 3 cancer, and I'm now 47 and it's progressed to lungs and liver.
At the age of 25, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer at the age of 36.
Always listen to your body. If something feels off, go to a doctor and get a second opinion, even though your doctor says you shouldn't worry. Better be safe than sorry.
Age should never be a barrier to receiving the proper care and attention from everyone, especially healthcare professionals.
We need to raise awareness about early onset colorectal cancer, as we don't want anyone to hear you are too young.
I'm very grateful with the support of an amazing medical team in Luxembourg and in Germany that I'm thriving with cancer 6 years on.
Never lose hope. Resilience carries you a long way.
It has been a roller coaster journey, many ups and downs, but I would say there's always a silver lining, and I'm still here enjoying life and living very happily.
It was a shock. It has been a shock. And now being a caregiver involves a lot of challenges and personal pressure, but it's also made it possible for us to refocus on what really matters and create a life that we didn't think was possible before.
Please remember that colorectal cancer is no longer a disease of the elderly. Please be aware of the signs and symptoms that can happen at any age.
Life goes on and knowledge is power.
You can still live a very happy and fulfilling life.
Follow your gut, and if you feel like there is something wrong with you, not to close yourself to open options, because it might be it as well. And if it's it, the earlier you spot it, the better.
The only reason why I'm here 17 years later is that I was diagnosed early. And it's really important that younger people are considered for having a cancer, because if they're not, then quite often that diagnosis can be too late.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. That was an incredibly powerful start to our session, and welcome to the 6th Colorectal Screening Cancer Summit. I watched that video like all of you, and I was inspired. I was shocked. If we wanted to make the message that this is not a disease that affects only older people, I think that message was beautifully made. It showed that a condition like this affects patients, carers, families, and societies. So that was a really great kickoff start for our event. Just to let you know, everyone, thank you all for joining. We had a record number of people who joined and who registered to be part of this. The video of this event will be on the DiCE website, so you'll be able to share it and to people who perhaps are not watching it right now. So thank you all for joining, and in advance to all our speakers who will help us to understand this issue. So let me start by introducing the first person who's going to talk to us. That's Erik van Cutsem. He's a founding member of Digestive Cancers Europe in Belgium, and he's going to give us a little bit more background about, what is the Screening Summit, why is it necessary, and how we're going to focus on implementation strategies. So let's welcome Erik.
Good morning. I'm Professor Erik van Cutsem from the University of Leuven, and I'm one of the co-founders of DiCE and also actual board member. And for me, it's a real pleasure to introduce again the 6th meeting on colorectal cancer screening. Screening is extremely important, and as an organization of DiCE, we think that we should work more on that, because prevention and screening is in fact the best treatment for cancer. And therefore we will discuss today some hot topics on the relevance of the screening, why it's so important. We will interact with politicians, with policymakers. Patients will be part of this screening summit. And also scientists, because there are really new evolutions also in screening. We can work on more blood tests in the future, on the role of the microbiome, and so make some individualized, personalized screening programs. There are many hurdles, and in some countries, screening is doing very well with good participation. But then there are other regions in Europe where awareness is not optimal, where the organization is not optimal, and where we need clearly more participation in order to have an impact. Because we have now data from some countries, if a screening program is well organized and leads to high participation, that we see a migration, a shift of more advanced cancers when the diagnosis is made at the moment of symptoms, compared to those patients who have a diagnosis through a screening program. In these patients, we see less advanced cancers with more early in situ colorectal cancers, and now even in some countries we see to start a decrease in the incidence of cancer. And of course, with the earlier stages, more stage 1 and 2, we will see an improvement in the survival rates also. So that's crucial. And therefore DiCE, and as DiCE community, and I want to thank really the core team of DiCE who organized this meeting. As a DiCE community, we're really keen on organizing and setting up the scene here for this 6th screening summit. Enjoy, interact, and see you during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor van Cutsem. And again, you highlighted that the good news, which is that screening, if it catches at much earlier stage, you have much better outcomes. And I think that's one of the key messages that we're going to be discussing during today's event. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce Alina Comenescu from Digestive Cancers Europe, Vice Chair of the board, and from Romania. Alina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, fellow patient advocates, industry partners, regulators, and above all, friends who fight every day for 1.3 million Europeans who will hear the words digestive cancers this year. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about a subject that stands at the heart of meaningful cancer advocacy, the importance of colorectal cancer screening and how we can harness it to advance patient outcomes, equity, and dignity. As Professor Katzam already stated, colorectal cancer remains one of the most preventable and treatable cancers that we face today. Yet it continues to take thousands of lives every year. From a patient and the public perspective, this is not a simple statistics. It's a clear signal that we are not using the tools that we already have, like prevention, early detection, timely screening to the full potential. But I'm not here to talk about fear. I'm here to talk about empowerment. From the perspective of patients and the general public, the discussion about colorectal cancer prevention and screening is not about the medical procedure. It's about a simple, profound act of choosing your future over fate. Because imagine that a 40-year-old father of two, let's call him Mihai, goes to the doctor because he's been feeling bloated and tired for months. He ignores it at first. He works in a stressful environment. Maybe he had a bad diet. By the time he gets a colonoscopy, the diagnosis is stage 4 colorectal cancer. His chances of seeing his daughters graduating high school drop less than 15%. Now imagine a different story. Mihai's sister, Anna, she hears about colorectal cancer screening at the community event. She's healthy, she has no symptoms, but she gets a fit test free from her family doctor. It's positive. A colonoscopy finds a stage 1 polyp. It's removed in 20 minutes. So Anna's 5-year survival rate over 90%. For sure, she will dance at her daughter's wedding. This is not just a story. This is the difference between prevention and catastrophe. And it is why rising awareness about colorectal cancer screening among general public is not optional. It's a moral imperative. For the general public, prevention often sounds abstract, but preventing colorectal cancer is concrete. It includes everyday action, like maintaining a healthy diet, being physical active, avoiding smoking. Some people are saying moderating alcohol consumption. I will say no alcohol consumption, managing weight and understanding personal and family risk factors. These are the choices that people can control, but only if they know that this choice matters. Awareness transforms habits to protective behaviors. I'm talking right now, unfortunately, from the care point of view. Many of us seen people diagnosed too late because no one told them that screening should start at a certain age or sooner. If we are talking about the risk stratification, we have seen families impacted not because treatment was impossible, but because detection came too late. Those are preventable losses. So why raising awareness beyond the medical community is so crucial? Because colorectal cancer awareness is a collective investment. It saves healthcare systems because early detection is infinitely cheaper than late stage care, because it preserves our community. When a young or middle-aged person is diagnosed with late-stage colorectal cancer, the ripple effects are devastating at the family level and at society level. And last but not least, it drives equity. Because awareness campaigns, particularly those targeting underdeserved or low-income communities, dismantle the socioeconomic barriers to screening. So everyone deserves a chance to live, regardless of their zip codes, because we are talking about empowering people. Thus, we help them to recognize the symptoms earlier, to ask better questions, and to advocate themselves in the healthcare systems. I've heard a lot of DiCE ambassador raising awareness about know your body and ask your doctor for more tests if you're not sure that everything it's all right. So I will conclude my speech with these universal take-home messages. Colorectal cancer is preventable, early detection saves lives, and awareness is the bridge between two. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alina. And you gave us two very powerful examples at the beginning, the difference in the life course between somebody who gets, when there's early signals, an opportunity for screening, for some detection and for some treatment. What a huge difference that makes. And again, the point you made is colorectal cancer is preventable. It is highly treatable if it's caught at an early stage. These are within our power, and with this knowledge exists. This is not new. It's to do with implementation, and we're going to discuss that more. So thank you very much, Alina. We're now going to have a message from a member of the European Parliament, Ms. Romana Jerkovic, from a Socialist MEP from Croatia, and she sent us this message.
Dear colleagues, dear cancer experts and patient advocates, it is a privilege to address you all today at the 6th DiCE Colorectal Cancer Screening Summit. Screening saves lives. That is why years ago, under Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, the European Union set a clear and ambitious target that 90% of the eligible Europeans are offered organized screening for breast, cervical and colorectal cancer. But ambition alone does not save lives. Implementation does. And it is precisely in the implementation of these guidelines that the EU is failing the most. The data presented in the recent EPRS study assessing the implementation of cancer plan makes this clear. At the EU level, only about 42% of the eligible population actually gets screened for colorectal cancer, with huge variation among member states. Such inequalities are worrying. This means that too many Europeans face later diagnosis and poorer health outcomes simply because of where they live. In addition to that, most screening programs for colorectal cancer in Europe focus on people aged 50 to 74. And that remains essential. But we cannot ignore the growing reality that more and more younger adults are being diagnosed with colorectal cancer. Therefore, our screening guidelines must consider those younger than 50 and at higher risk. For example, people with family history of colorectal cancer or advanced polyps. Far too often, they are diagnosed late when the disease has progressed and treatment options are less effective. What that means in practice is that we are literally failing a generation. But early detection is only one part of our fight. We cannot speak about personal responsibility in cancer prevention while entire industries make profit by shaping unhealthy environments. Colorectal cancer risk rises with excessive alcohol consumption, unhealthy diets, and the consumption of ultra-processed products. Yet, these products are cheaper, more aggressively marketed, and more available than ever. So, let us be honest. Prevention without regulation is hypocrisy. Public health cannot rely on individual will, while corporate interests have unlimited tools and financing to influence consumer behavior. If we are serious about reducing colorectal cancer, then we need rules that protect citizens. That means regulating alcohol marketing, mandatory front-of-pack labeling, and maybe even taxes on unhealthy and ultra-processed food, and not voluntary gestures and empty promises. Real prevention requires political courage and action. And our responsibility is clear: to build a Europe where colorectal cancer is prevented wherever possible, detected early when it does occur, and never allowed to take lives simply because access to screening and treatment depends on where someone lives in the European Union. Let us make progress on colorectal cancer a reality and not just a promise. Thank you, and I wish you a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much to that message from Romana Jerkovic. And she highlighted some of the areas where political decisions can make a difference. So she called for political courage and looked at some of the risk factors. And she highlighted that some of them, whether it's alcohol consumption or ultra-processed food, these are particularly damaging for communities from lower socioeconomic groups because these are often products that are heavily marketed and available. So she called for political courage to understand that this is a support that could be offered to patients by policymakers. We now have another message from a policymaker, and this is from the MEP Aurelijus Veryga. He's an MEP from Lithuania. He's also a former medical doctor himself, and he's from the European Conservatives and Reformist Party. Let's hear his message.
Dear friends, my name is Aurelijus Veryga. I'm a member of European Parliament from Lithuania, a member of European Conservatives and Reformists group, and a doctor by profession. It is my great pleasure to address you at the 6th DiCE Colorectal Cancer Screening Summit. Colorectal cancer remains a formidable public health challenge, claiming tens of thousands of lives across Europe every year. Yet, it is also one of the most preventable and treatable cancers when detected early. This reality presents us with both an enormous challenge and an extraordinary opportunity. As a medical professional, I know firsthand how critical early detection is not just for saving lives, but for preserving quality of life and reducing the burden on our healthcare systems. Effective screening programs are not merely a medical necessity. They are a fundamental part of fair, resilient, and equitable healthcare system. Our responsibility is clear: to ensure that every citizen in every member state, no matter their location or socio-economic background, has access to these life-saving screening services. As policymakers, we must foster stronger collaboration across Europe, promote the adoption of best practices, and allocate resources wisely so that screening programs are not only effective but also sustainable, accessible, and trusted by the public. The work you are doing here today, sharing experience, refining strategies, building partnerships, is vital to transforming vision into reality. Let us use this summit to strengthen our collective resolve. Let us commit to turning discussions into concrete actions and policies into measurable progress. I extend my sincere thanks to Digestive Cancers Europe for their unwavering leadership, and to all of you for your dedication to this critical cause. Thank you, and have a very productive event.
Thank you very much to MEP Verygas. This was a very clear message from a policymaker, and of course he was also not just a doctor but a former Minister of Health in Lithuania. This is a clear message of understanding of again, policymakers putting themselves right in front of the patient community, saying we want to turn the actions, the recommendations into something that actually makes a difference to patients' lives. So thank you for that. Now we'd like to offer the floor to Stefan Giesels, who is a patient advocate who's going to share his experience of being a survivor and his experience of going through it. So please, Stefan, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. I hope you can see my slides. I'll give first of all, I want to thank Erik van Cutsem for having treated me so many years ago. He was my oncologist, and I still appreciate that I'm alive. So thanks to him and his teams. I was diagnosed with colorectal cancer in 2015. This is my identity card. I had several interventions, 6 months of chemotherapy, several complications, etc., and declared free of cancer exactly 10 years ago. So very happy to be alive and very happy to be with you all. This is my road to diagnosis, and my story is not unique. I mean, the quality and the value of my story is that it's absolutely not unique. It's something that is all too common for patients with colorectal cancer. In November in 2014, I had severe pain in my abdomen, and it kept going on and on and on and off, but it was, gradually, I said, it's time to go see a doctor. I went to my family doctor, who happens to be a professor in general practice, so I assumed that he knew what he was doing, and he thought I had appendicitis. So I got a cure of antibiotics in December 11 years ago. And then a few weeks later, the pain was still there, and so I went back, and he said, I'll give you another antibiotic cure, another 2 weeks. Nothing happened, and the pain kept increasing and getting worse. And so at a certain moment, the pain was so acute that he told me, let's go to the emergency services of the academic hospital. And I went to the academic hospital, and they asked a number of things. They didn't do any test, but they asked a lot of questions about what I did the day before. And I happened to play tennis the day before. So he said, probably it's because you played tennis yesterday. I said, this has been going on for 4 months. And he said, no worry. It's the muscle of your abdomen. It will get better by itself. Be patient and relax a little bit. Of course, Dr. Google existed already 10 years ago. So I looked at my risk profile and tried to diagnose myself. And so the only conclusion that I could draw from all the information that I had was that I had colorectal cancer. With that insight, I went back to my GP, and I told him the white lie. A white lie is a lie that is, you do it for the best, not to deceive someone. I gave a white lie to my GP, and I said my father and grandfather died of colorectal cancer, which obviously was not true, but I wanted to make him act. And funnily enough, he never asked for a family history of colorectal cancer. That was not even on his radar. So I assume if you come with symptoms that the doctor will look at your antecedents and try to identify what's happening. He never asked it. And so he immediately, a little bit shocked by the information that I provided him, gave me a prescription for a colonoscopy at the hospital, where I went. And when I woke up from my colonoscopy, the endoscopist said, you have colorectal cancer, you need urgent surgery, which I booked in. And then that when the process started of getting surgery and chemotherapy, etc. The funny or not so funny thing was when I came back, and it was my birthday is in March. When I came back and opened my mailbox, I had a stool test in my mailbox for my 55th birthday. And that was the period when the screening program in Belgium started at the age of 55. And I know today it's lower to 50, and maybe it should be lower to 45 moving forward. I know many countries start at 55, but if you think what could have been prevented, the impact of colorectal cancer is, first of all, it's the horror in the family. The anxiety, the lack of perspective, the stress on the relationship, the impact on the anxiety among the children. I had 3 hospitalizations, including complications, infections in the course of my treatment. Imagine the pain, the nausea, the weight and the hair loss, the impact on your social life, your professional life, the impact on everything that you like in your hobbies and sports that I like. Also impact on self-image. Treatment cost for me was 70,000 euro. And then, of course, after that, 10 years of follow-up. So initially, it's every quarter CT scan, MRI scan, annual colonoscopy, and also, in my case, gastroscopy. And then every half year, and now it's luckily only once a year. But I still have this in the background of my life. All this could have been avoided. All this could have been prevented if screening programs had started earlier. And there's a lot of impact on an individual, but I think also a lot of impact on society. The importance of screening is an early diagnosis. If you're diagnosed in stage 1, you have 90% probability of survival, roughly. But we also made the calculation based on health economic analysis in Europe with Digestive Cancers Europe a couple of years ago. So if you're diagnosed in stage 1, its cost of treatment is 1/10 of a late stage cancer. And that's not surprising because you just have an easy intervention by a surgeon. Countries with high quality colorectal cancer screening programs have higher detection of stage 1 colorectal cancer. And I think this is actually the target that we should focus on. I know that in the European Beating Cancer Plan, they have the very soft and I think not so ambitious target of inviting 90% of the citizens to participate in the screening program. That's a very low threshold target. And I think looking at it from a patient perspective, the actual target should be the number of patients diagnosed in stage 1 colorectal cancer. And I think this is the ambitious goal that policymakers should have. I made this kind of fake annual report of any screening agency in Europe. And so they should have the target on the cover. How many patients, that's the only result that matters. How many patients with stage 1 colorectal cancer have you diagnosed thanks to the screening program? The objective and the current best practice is 48%. That's what's happened in the Netherlands. I think this is the target every single country should aspire to. And every single screening agency should put on the cover of their annual report the percentage of patients they have diagnosed in stage 1 cancer. That's the only measure of a good quality colorectal cancer screening program. Let's take that as a figure. Let's take that as an aspiration. And then for the individuals, I would like to recommend the simple adagio that Dr. Luc Colomont always used: do the test. Every citizen should participate in it. And I think if the government agencies do their work and if the patients are sufficiently active and proactive, things will get better in the future. With this, I want to thank you for your attention, and I wish you a very good colorectal cancer screening summit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Very powerful to see your journey and to see the extent to which you essentially had to diagnose yourself and to raise the flag of a potential family history for it to be taken seriously. So I think it's a very good example, and let's hope that things have changed over the last 10 years. But again, you've given us a really powerful advocacy target to say it's not enough to aim for just making sure that people are invited to screening. You should actually aim for the outcome of that screening to be actionable. So a number of the percentage of people who are can be found at early stage, because of the huge impact both for them as their health outcomes and for the cost for society. It's so much better to find it at an early stage. So thank you so much, Stefan. We're now going to move to our first panel. Let me just explain how each of our panels will work. To sort of set the scene for our panels, we'll always have a short 10-minute presentation at the beginning to give us some context. And then we have some speakers who will help us to explore it. And you will have a chance to play a part in that, because there is if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a Q&A option, and you will be sending in your questions for the speakers of the panel. So as you listen to the presentation and their speeches, please put your questions in, because we do have time in the agenda. We want to make sure that we are meeting your needs. So I'll be keeping an eye on the Q&A section. So this first panel is looking at the new recommendations and guidelines for colorectal cancer screening. We've just heard those powerful testimonies of how important it is to have an adequate screening program, appropriately targeted, and to also make sure that it isn't just older people who are caught, that we can also acknowledge that younger people are also at risk. So let me introduce, I'll tell you who's on our panel, and then I'll pass to our first speaker. So we have Gianpaolo Morgano, who is a project officer at the European Commission's Joint Research Centre in Italy. He'll be giving us the opening presentation. And then helping us to explore that on my panel, I have Cesare Hassan from the European Society of Gastrointestinal Endoscopy, ESGE. He's from Italy. I have Annette Janusz-Roy, a scientific officer also at the European Commission's Joint Research Centre in Italy. Isabel Mosquera-Metcalf, a scientist on early detection, prevention and infections at AIRC. And Zorana Marovic, who is the CEO of DiCE, Digestive Cancers Europe, from Belgium. So that's going to be on our panel. But let me start by inviting Gianpaolo to take the floor and to give us an overview of what's in the new European colorectal cancer screening guidelines. Gianpaolo, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So first and foremost, a big thank you to Digestive Cancers Europe for giving us the opportunity to disseminate our activities. Today, my presentation will cover two main areas. I will first introduce the European Commission initiatives on cancer screening and care, and then I will go more in detail about the European Cancer Guidelines, including the recommendations on screening tests. I'm connected from Ispra in Italy, where one of the sites of the Joint Research Centre, also known as JRC, is located. The JRC is a Directorate General of the European Commission. We are independent from any economic interest, and our responsibility is to produce scientific evidence to inform EU policies. Currently, the European Commission, under the leadership of DG Santé and DG JRC, is conducting 6 initiatives to support EU member states in implementing organized population-based screening programs. These efforts are based on the recommendation on cancer screening that were made in 2022 from the Council of the European Union, but also based on several requirements made by the European Parliament. The focus on our initiatives is on 6 high-incident cancer, namely breast, colorectal, cervical, lung, prostate, and gastric cancer. In this slide, I would like to outline which are the 2 core objectives for our initiatives. So the first, of course, is to improve quality of cancer screening care, but also our initiative aimed at reducing inequalities across Europe, because we are aware that those inequalities in cancer outcomes persist. To achieve these goals, through our initiative, we developed 2 main tools. The first tool are the European guidelines that typically cover primary prevention, screening, and diagnosis, but we also produce quality assurance schemes, which aim at ensuring that there is a continuum of care after screening. In summary, our mission is to create practical and ready-to-use instruments that member states, but also healthcare professionals, can implement directly. On this slide, I listed some of the key features of our initiatives. Most important, our initiatives are evidence-based. We use a structured and transparent methodology for its development. It's not the Commission that directly issues the recommendations or the requirements in the QA, but we rely on the expertise of multidisciplinary panels, which include patients or patient representatives. And all these panels are operating under a strict conflict of interest management policy. I will now elaborate more on the European colorectal cancer guidelines that are developed as part of our initiative, which is called the European Initiative on Colorectal Cancer, also known as ACICC. In this slide, I would like to acknowledge the crucial work of the ACICC working group. But also, I would like to acknowledge the contribution that is provided by additional experts that are not in this picture, but that they are providing their knowledge and expertise through a membership in the so-called topic-specific group. The collective effort of these experts is instrumental in shaping our guidelines, so this is an opportunity for us to thank them. In this slide, I would also take the opportunity to draw your attention to the document that you can see on the right-hand side of this screen. This document is publicly available, it's published on our website. I provide the link at the bottom of the slides. And this document includes all the questions that were prioritized by our working group. So our job as JRC is to ensure that this question will be systematically addressed in our guidelines through evidence-based recommendations. As I mentioned, our guidelines are developed using a systematic and transparent methodology. We rely on the GRADE approach and use the so-called evidence to decision framework. The GRADE approach is an internationally recognized methodology for developing of guidelines that to date has been adopted by over 110 health organizations across the world, including DiCE, WHO, and CDC. This methodology is very important because it helps us ensure that when making recommendations, our experts consider all the factors that are important to inform these recommendations. And this is critical because therefore these decisions are not based only on the effectiveness of the information, but also on people values, resource use, health equity, acceptability, and feasibility. All these criteria are informed by judgments that are based on a review of the scientific literature. Through this table, I'd like to show you which are the topics that are going to be covered in our guidelines, along with the current development status and timeline. So as it was mentioned before, primary prevention is very important. This can be achieved through healthy lifestyles. The working group has already issued good practice statements around the alcohol consumption, smoking cessation, or physical activity. The working group has already issued recommendations looking at the screening ages, frequencies, and tests, and also 2 recommendations around how people should be invited to participate in organized population-based screening program for colorectal cancer, and how this should be managed. There are a number of ongoing activities that will result in guidelines recommendations. These activities relate to the use of chemoprevention for primary prevention, but also management of premenstrual lesions, and also the determination of the best cutoff threshold for fit test positivity in organized population-based screening programs. At the bottom of this table, you will see also the topics that we plan to address starting from 2026 or later. Very importantly, these recommendations, once they are issued by the working group and are finally approved, are made publicly available on our dedicated web app. To make it easy for you to access this resource, I provide a QR code on my final slide, and this QR code will directly take you to our publication page. In the last part of my presentation, I would like to provide you with an overview of the recommendation screening ages, frequencies, and tests that has been issued by the SACC working group. And those are screenshots taken from our website. These recommendations are based on the systematic review of the existing literature on the subject, and this review process examined the randomized controlled trials, observational studies, but also microsimulation models. The SACC working group recommended implementing organized population-based colorectal cancer screening for all average risk of age 50 to 69. And this is a strong recommendation based on moderate certainty of the evidence. In terms of screen test, the preferred screening approach is FIT, or fecal immunochemical test, and this should be conducted every 2 years. when fit-based screening is conducted, the working group suggests continuing screening until the age of 74, and this is a conditional recommendation based on low certainty of the evidence. In countries where FIT is not feasible to implement, the working group suggests endoscopy-based screening until the age of 69. And in this case, the suggested test is a colonoscopy every 15 years, or if colonoscopy is not available, also a flexible sigmoidoscopy every 10 years is a valuable alternative. Those are both conditionally recommended. For the time being, and based on the review of the existing evidence, which provided them with very low certainty, for now there is a conditional recommendation for not starting screening before the age of 50. But the working group noted how this recommendation may change depending also on the baseline risk of the country. In this slide, I provide with the justification. In short, the balance between benefit and harms was in favor of fit screening, which was deemed to be acceptable, feasible, but also increase health equity. And here I provide you with the QR code to our European Commission web hub, where you will find information on all the ongoing initiatives. So, of course, the one on colorectal cancer, but also the one on gastric cancer and the other cancer. I thank you for your time and leave the floor back to the colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, there was lots of very useful information in that presentation. And as a reminder to everyone who's watching, we're now going to be, I've got a number of speakers, and then we will be having a Q&A. So please use at the bottom of the screen the Q&A function if you have questions either for Gianpaolo or anyone else who's going to speak. So thank you very much. Let me invite Cesare Hassan to respond with a short message around the clinical practice perspective. Cesare, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Tamsin. I would need the help of Mariana if she can project the Q3 slide that I prepared. So I congratulate with Gianpaolo and all the JRC for the great effort. And from clinical perspective and from the perspective of the European Society of Endoscopy, what really makes the difference, can we go to the first slide, is whether a screening intervention is organized or non-organized. I want to stress this because only if you organize, you can measure. If it is non-organized, you cannot measure anything, or you can only try to guess. So if we organize, we can measure the uptake. It may be high, it may be low. We can measure the efficacy of an intervention to improve the uptake. And there is a lot of over-diagnosis and over-follow-up. But if we don't measure the follow-up, we don't know how much good the compliance is. We always talk about quality of the endoscopists as much as of the radiologists, etc. But if we don't have an organized program, we cannot measure the quality of the endoscopists and of the intervention in general. Finally, we are here to prevent cancer, and we need to know when we fail. This means to measure the risk of interval cancer after any screening intervention. If the program is non-organized, it is nearly impossible to have a good estimate of our failure. That is where we do learn how to do things better. Next slide. So in between FIT and endoscopies, I don't see so much as relevant issue as compared with the previous one. But we must admit that we don't have the capacity to screen today and simultaneously all the population. So if we introduce an endoscopy screening, this means that some people will need to wait a lot of years before getting screening, and there is the risk of inequality in what we do offer. If it is non-organized, there is also the risk that people who can afford endoscopy have prioritized access to endoscopy screening. So FIT to me seems the best way for population screening, as Gianpaolo stressed. The risk of colonoscopy also is overdiagnosis because we find 70% of adenoma, but only 1% or even less will develop a cancer. And then I guess that endoscopists today should spend more time in doing resection of advanced neoplasia that is driven out from surgery or biliopancreatic endoscopy or EUAs. So there is an opportunistic cost in forcing endoscopists to do just basic diagnostic procedure for all the population. Next slide, and also the last slide, is the consideration of age and gender. We feel as endoscopy that the priority today is still the 69-74-year-old window that Gianpaolo stressed, or even after 74, because there is much more cancer there than in between 40 and 50. So we also agree to recommend against an organized program before the age of 50. And in addition, since the endoscopy resource is limited, we welcome any additional certification that can be done on consecutive tests. And we are not against considering the female protection coming from isopotylcynic exposure during the lifetime. But finally, for this onset of for the early onset of cancer in some countries, we do agree that we need to advertise that early diagnosis make a difference, like in Africa. So an immediate access to opportunistic FIT should be considered for any young person who is getting symptomatic. So this is my last slide, and it is nice that the endoscopy organization is totally in line with the new guideline by Gianpaolo and all the team. And I feel that we can push together this guideline as much as we can. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and very useful to get your perspective on, yes, absolutely implementation of the guidelines, but be aware of potential capacity issues and the ability to actually implement those things. And you also raised the important point about equity, making sure that everyone has access to that. So thank you very much, Cesare. Can I now invite Annette Janusz-Roy to provide some insight into the work that's been done over the last couple of years? And I'm just going to remind everyone, please submit your questions in the Q&A because we will have time to engage with you in a little bit. Annette, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thanks again. I want to reiterate a thanks from Gianpaolo to the organizers to give us the possibility to show us snapshot of a major European activity that contributes to a common goal, namely to strengthen the prevention for early detection. My role at the Commission's Joint Research Center is to oversee the coordination of the development of guidelines and quality assurance schemes, now talking about 6 of the most relevant 6 cancer sites. And strengthen preventions for early detection by means of population-based organized screening programs, as Cesare underlined. This is our mandate, is a high priority for the European Commission. And the European Commission is investing a lot of efforts of different levels, not only to make this happening, but also to combat inequalities. Numbers have been shown by the colleagues from the European Parliament. There are large areas without any screening, others better covered. But in addition to that, there's also a question of quality assurance. Cesare pointed to that because it's a question of to monitor improvements, to get the data shared, and has quite an impact to really make a step forward. And the numbers, unfortunately, still show a quite fragmented picture. With these initiatives, however, the European Commission intends to help countries, regions, member states, or we call it, to implement organized population-based screening, but also to guarantee the continuum of the care after screening, and this in a quality-ensured manner, because screening and diagnosis is organized across the EU, across Europe, in a very different manner. And you have only a success if you ensure that a person does not fall between the stools, because it's offered by different services. The structures are highly different. And this is a key what we are doing when developing guidelines. One of the 12 criteria we are checking is that it's respectful of the different infrastructure. And at the other hand, there is no impact without implementation, because this is the basis for implementing, to make it in a way that's flexible and adaptable to the different situations. Now, consider that the development of guidelines and quality assurance schemes are addressing 6 cancer sites, the most relevant cancer sites. I mean, we are talking nothing less than over 50% of cancer burden in the European Union in terms of incidence and in terms of mortality. And being active there means that we assign to the impact a potential of being really high to reduce the burden of cancer, which is the overall aim of the European Union and driven by the European Commission. And right in that, implementation is the key point here. And here I would like to say a couple of words on the quality assurance scheme. The quality assurance scheme, which we are developing together with the guidelines for each of the cancer sites, is the vehicle to implement guidelines. You get it through that by the different services. And is the vehicle to monitor the improvements of quality. Because if you have that in place, because our survey we did also showed that quality assurance for endoscopy is not always in place. For FIT, yes, but for endoscopy not. But this is a barrier to the exchange of data, which has quite a long consequence. And it is therefore important to make it fit for the purpose. That's our goal. And fit for the purpose means to be reflective of the different infrastructure. And to do that is one of our aim of attending today. And I thank once again the organizers. We need to reach out, because the quality assurance scheme, which is delivered by the European Commission for each of the cancer sites, and we did already for breast cancer early this year, has to be tested. Considering if you really would like to have an implant, if you really would like that it's implemented, and I have to be very clear on that. No implementation, no impact. We can talk and present, but if we don't get it through in the really where the need is, where the operation is, we fail. And therefore, it's important to reach out. It's important to have our audience. This is the first step from our side for colorectal cancer, which started in 2022. And at a certain point, we are aiming to set up, or to create an awareness which leads centers, services, a kind of manifestation of interest. And when we are coming to testing also the scheme for colorectal cancer, that we have enough different settings, a high variety of participants to have the feedback and to make it fit for the purpose. Today, I consider that as the first step in that direction, and I thank all of you for that possibility, in particular the working group that the Commission has from colorectal cancer, but also for the other cancer sites, which are doing an amazing job together with my colleagues, Gianpaolo leading on colorectal cancer, in steering the initiatives together with the chairs we have. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. And again, we were starting to get some questions in already. That's great. Keep those questions coming, because we'll have the Q&A in a few moments. Let me now invite Isabel Mosquera-Metcalf to take the floor and to give us some reflections on the upcoming third screening report. Isabel, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me. So to talk about the third screening report, we have to go back a few years to the Council recommendation from 2003, in which they were talking about, obviously, about the organized screening programs. There it was indicated that there needed to be centralized data systems that ensure data protection, that should be registering and managing screening data, and there should be a regular monitoring of the process and outcomes of the organized screening programs. A few years later, there was the first screening report published in 2008, and it collected mainly qualitative information. There was a few questions related to what if they were monitoring process and outcomes, and only 55% of the countries were doing this. If we look at the proportion of population that was actually being served by population-based screening programs, only 41% of the examinations were following this. When we move forward to the second European report that was published in 2017, there was already some quantitative information, but it was quite limited and it was difficult to compare. So it was pointed out also that there had been an increase in the number of population-based screening programs for the three cancer sites, breast, cervical, and colorectal, but colorectal was the one that had a highest increase in that period. And what they talked about also is the examination coverage. So for all cancer sites, it was below 50%. So as an average, so for example, for breast cancer, it was a 49% as an average, 30% for cervical cancer, but only 14% for colorectal cancer. Then in this second European report, there was a list of reference standards for the screening programs. But again, if you looked at it, the cancer sites for which there was a shorter list was for colorectal cancer again. Then we moved to 2022, that has been mentioned previously by my colleagues. So when the Council recommendation urges countries that 90% of the population that's eligible for breast, cervical, and colorectal cancer should be offered screening, and also the piloting of the lung, prostate, and gastric cancer screenings. And this is something, the degree of implementation of this is something that we want to see with the third screening report, together also with how much is the compliance to the European initiatives that have been mentioned previously. There'll also be a focus on measuring key performance indicators. And this will be an opportunity also for countries to actually collect systematically this information and to ensure that they have the adequate infrastructure to collect this on a regular basis. Also, this information will be disseminated from the screening programs in the European Cancer Information System platform. So this will be available for the policymakers, program managers, and health professionals, and also the general public. So this is how this third screening report has recently been launched. It was launched last month, and it's meant to be ending by end of 2027, where we will have the third screening report. So we'll be able to have a better understanding of what's the situation across Europe. And that's all on my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabel. How interesting to hear about the iteration. Each report has gathered more information, more detail, and given us greater clarity on the situation across Europe. And so on that understanding, each new report would deliver greater granularity on that. So thank you for that. Let me now invite Zorana Marovic to take the floor to give us a perspective from patients.
Thank you, Tamzin. Thank you for moderating this event again. And I want to use this opportunity also to take all the speakers and also to thank them for inspiring us. The reason why we are doing the Screening Summit is because we understand that only by having organized formal population screening programs across Europe, we can reduce the burden for the citizens of Europe. And I will give you my perspective from being part of the working group within the ECICC and also some topic-specific group. Just want to highlight, Gianpaolo explained briefly the robustness of the methodology. And, you know, from a citizen, from a people perspective, it's really reassuring to know that all the data that exists has been taken into consideration. As a patient advocate, I am also asked all the times, you know, whether the screening age will be lowered to 45. And after careful reviewing of the data that currently exist, I think the decision that was made was not an easy one, but was the right one. And this is why the screening will continue to start for the average population, for the population that is at average risk from colorectal cancer at the age of 50. Also, I want to highlight that, you know, the multidisciplinary approach and the patient inclusive approach, that everybody has the opportunity to be heard within the working group discussions, and also that we see this new recommendation as the opportunity for countries to reinforce their screening programs, to make them stronger, and by making them stronger, to reduce the inequalities that currently exist across Europe. What Stefan mentioned, that screening started later in Belgium when he was diagnosed with colorectal cancer. Now it's lowered, but the screening programs across Europe should try to apply the recommendations as they are. Obviously, we understand that capacity is always an issue, but aim to apply them as they are with organized screening programs. And for the moment, I will just reiterate some of the messages that we heard before from the citizen perspective. Do the test and choose the future over fate. And only by doing this, by participating in the screening, we as the citizens can have more people diagnosed at earlier stages and improve the outcomes for these patients. So over to you, Tamsin.
Thank you very much, Zorana, and also for sharing what it was like to sit in the committee, in the expert working group who came up with these recommendations. And as you said, it was a very careful, considered process. It was a difficult decision that was made, but it had to be based on weighing up the evidence and the implementability of the screening guidelines. So thank you for that. Now, as I promised, it's the opportunity for us to answer your questions. So we have a little bit of time before we take a break. So please submit your questions. We've had some already submitted and we've been answering them. A couple of people have said, can we have the link to Giampaolo's presentation and the link to the guidelines? We've put a link in there. It will be part of the materials after this event that will be on the DiCE website. So don't worry, all of that information will be available to you. We've got one question that's already come in from Jill. Thank you, Jill. And it's a question for Giampaolo directly. And she says, look, almost half of all colorectal cancers happen after the age of 74, which is when the screening stops. So what are the screening options there? How are we capturing that? And I think that's an interesting question for us to pick up on. So Giampaolo, can you answer that?
Thank you. So the idea of screening is that by starting screening at age 50, throughout age 69 or 74, we detect early the precancerous lesions or early stage cancers. So we try to lower down the number of new cases that might happen after age 74. So of course, this might happen in the context of no screening. So this is the age where you might find more cases. But if people have regularly participated in colorectal cancer screening, we expect this number to be low in that age group. Again, those are measures at a population level. So we try to identify the age ranges for which there is a higher balance between benefit and harms. And we believe that screening that age group brings us with the greater benefit. And already the recommendation for screening in the age 69 to 74 was a conditional recommendation, which means that the impact is lower as compared to the 50 to 69, and that's why in that age range, eventually there was a recommendation, there was a suggestion against screening in that age. So it has to be examined whether this is in the context of an organized population-based screening being in place or not.
Thank you for that. We've got a question that's for all members of the panel. It's to say, how do you see digital solutions, particularly AI, playing a role in risk stratification? Now, I know that this is the screening guidelines use the words an average risk person. So clearly that means there's some kind of risk stratification. Is this something, if we're concerned about, capacity, is this something where AI or digital solutions could play a role? Who from the panel would like to, if you just let me know who's ready to answer on what role digital solutions or AI could play in helping us to make sure we target, based on their risk profile, people who might need interventions or screening, perhaps outside the sort of age range for guidelines. Who would like to answer that one?
Maybe just for me to start with, the use of artificial intelligence is part of any of the discussions of our working group member. It has been for the breast cancer, and it will be also for the colorectal cancer. So this is part when the working group is prioritizing the healthcare question, the issues where the recommendation provides a reply to. It's of course also a basis for personalized screening, and we have had only recently, and Sorana, Gianpaolo remember, that we started at least to enter into the domain of personalized screening for the future. So the working group at a certain point will also in their priorities consider these aspects and discuss it. But it is routine part for us of the table of the discussions of the working group members, of course.
Thank you. Gianpaolo, are you also going to comment?
Yes, no, thanks for the question, which is a very actually interesting one. So in the field, for example, of breast cancer, there are AI algorithms that are able to provide the information about the risk based on the images coming from the mammograms. So this is something that we already do, and there are actual recommendations in our guidelines for breast cancer. In the field of colorectal cancer, there is some use of AI to assist the detection of lesions through colonoscopy, but these questions were not at the moment prioritized because the research might not be very, very mature at this stage. And then, of course, we are also interested in risk stratification. So AI algorithms might help in determining the risk based on risk factors. This is something that we are considering when we will look more in detail in how to further stratify. So as of now, we don't include recommendation, but this is something that we always have in mind, as we've done already, for example, with the breast cancer panel, because our guidelines want to be up to date. So we want to make sure that all the emerging technologies and tools that can support the implementation of cancer screening are considered. So we are always in alert, and we always engage with our panel members to make sure that all the new technologies are captured.
I think, in fact, that is one of the strengths of the European initiatives. These are not a project which starts today and ends at a certain point, which is usual for the EU projects. The Commission is committed also to ensure continuity, and as such, around the question of AI, no discussion comes around anymore. So it's integral part of our planning.
If I may add, Tamzin, yes, I just wanted from the member of the working group to highlight, this area is so big, and I think it's realistic that there was a strong need for prioritization. And this is why the first set of recommendations were public on the test and on the age range. And the other topics will come later. These topics have not been discussed yet, but only because there were other priorities. But I'm sure that everything that is relevant and important for screening will be brought to the table and will be discussed, and the evidence will be reviewed and the recommendations will be made.
Thank you. We've got a question saying, why does the Netherlands still wait until 55 to start colorectal cancer screening? So I don't know if anyone is able to give us some input on that. Perhaps that might change as a result of these guidelines. Is anyone able to speak to that?
Yes, we have a speaker from another panel that we can bring.
Maybe I can give the answer.
Oh, Monique, yes, please.
Monique van Lidam from the Netherlands. I will give you one of the answers in my talk I'm the one at the end of the meeting. So I will go over that answer.
Fantastic, thank you. So we'll pin that question and we'll come back to it. Let me sort of invite you to also think about a couple of other issues. Let's talk perhaps about the performance indicators that are going to be in the report. Isabel, maybe you can speak about that. You know, we spoke earlier, and Stefan in his introduction sort of said, actually, every national agency should be having on its front cover the number of people that it finds at early stage, because it's much more treatable and better health outcomes than that. So he's given us a plan for a target. From your perspective, Isabel, what are the performance indicators that are going to be measured in the report?
So thank you for that question. As I was mentioning, there's this test screening report has just been launched, but there's been preparatory work before this. The CanScreenX project was looking at actually piloting how to introduce this screening data in the European Cancer Information System, and also testing the tools that would be used. And they also set a list of key performance indicators for breast, cervical, colorectal, and lung cancer screening. So obviously there's some invitation that has to be there, also screening different indicators like that per examination coverage, participation rate, that test result. Also something as Cesare was pointing out before, that we need to look at the follow-up. So if there's compliance with the triage, if it's applicable for the cancer sites, or compliance with further assessment, and the detection rate. So here we'll be looking also at the cancer cases that are detected. It's true that in this list that they've prepared, they don't specifically mention the staging, but this is something that countries normally collect. They will be looking also at harms for actually participating in screening and further assessment. If there's opportunistic screening performed linked to this, and also impact indicators like looking at the mortality and the incidence rate of the cancer site. So these are the ones that are recommended to be collected. Then we have to see what each country can provide, because maybe the information systems are not yet ready to do this, but still this is what they are going to be asking the countries to provide.
Thank you. Zorana, can I invite you to help us to understand a little bit about what we might call the implementation gap, which is, you know, the difference between the processes put in place for screening and actual uptake by patients. So can you help us to understand, are there issues around trust or something else that we should address to ensure that more patients take up the invitation? And where do you see the biggest gaps between what patients actually need and what's currently being provided?
Thank you, Tamzin, for that question. I think it's really important one, because, you know, having screening recommendations and having implementation, it's something really different. And in order for screening to make a difference, it is important that citizens do the test, that they participate in the screening. And I think this is where communication is really important. It's key, it's crucial. It's important to have the information about screening in a language that is easy to be understood by the participants of the screening. It is important to have organized screening program in a way that when, for example, a fit test is positive and there is a follow-up colonoscopy to be performed, that it is organized in a clear and timely manner, in order not to create any emotional distress to the participant. And I think this is where we as patient organizations could help, because we could translate the information to a language that patients understand. We could also bring real-world insights into how screening is performed, and aside from, you know, all the parameters that are being monitored, in order to help and improve screening programs. And we can also co-create communication strategies in order to overcome any questions or concerns that might arise, or that are the reasons why people are not participating in the screening program. And also we should learn from countries that are doing it well. Why reinvent the wheel if there are programs that are doing it well? Let's replicate that in other countries.
Thank you. In the last few minutes that we have together, let me challenge you all, because the opening of our summit had a fabulous 5-minute video which featured young patients. For the youngest patient who was on screen was 22, but it was showing people who in their 30s and 40s who were diagnosed mostly at stage 3, so quite late. We've heard about the implementation guidelines, and that is looking at the sort of age 50 and above, and that's quite understandable. But can I invite you all to sort of make a comment on how do we ensure that we still capture the people who opened our summit by the young diagnosis? I understand they fall outside the overall risk norms that have been put there, but how do we make sure, as a basis of equity, we capture this community? So maybe Gianpaolo, can I invite you to start?
Sure. So something that it's important to bear in mind is that our recommendations are targeting asymptomatic average risk adults. So of course, as it was mentioned, it is important to have a knowledge of our own body and be aware of which might be the symptoms that they might suggest of having a disease like colorectal cancer. We monitor very carefully the new evidence, and we in a constant manner verify whether new evidence will change the existing recommendation. That again is a conditional recommendation. And my suggestion is to also implement primary prevention measures as the one that have been recommended by the working group to the good practice statements, which aim at lowering our baseline risk of developing the disease. So minimizing alcohol consumption, for example, is a way to not increase the risk of colorectal cancer. Physical activity, smoking cessation, to not smoke. Those are very important measures that we should all follow in any age of our life, but especially in the old age, to prevent to prevent all cancers in general, including colorectal cancer.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to very briefly add, because we've only got 3 minutes left in our session? Zorana.
I would like, yes, thank you. On top of what Gianpaolo mentioned, I don't want to repeat because I completely agree. I just want to highlight that in this case, these were the young adults that had symptoms, and they went to see their healthcare providers, and they dismissed their symptoms because they're too young. So I think the solution is to work with primary healthcare professionals to raise awareness about the increase of early age onset digestive cancers, and then also to empower citizens to advocate for themselves and to listen to their bodies. If there is something wrong, you should seek solutions and not dismiss them. Over to you, Tamsin.
Thank you very much.
Touch quickly on that, and also to frame. In effect, the initiatives are focusing on an average risk population, asymptomatic population. Of course, if you have symptoms, and then we are taking already for colorectal cancer, we extended our scope to primary prevention for the very obvious reasons that have been said. But the target is there, and then there is the primary prevention, where is quite a room for action. But we have also here good practice statements to give direction on that. However, if you have symptoms, you go your way out of the population-based organized frame and have to follow up.
Thank you. Isabel, 1 minute left.
Yes, just to complement, we're talking about primary prevention. In the European Code Against Cancer, there's a list, this is something new in this European Code, that there's a list of actually recommendations how to implement this policy-wise. So policymakers have a guide on how they can make this happen. You know, for example, taxes is something that normally works in many things. So take these things into account and can help in this way. But this is only just to add on what my colleagues have said.
Thank you very much. We've come to the end of our time together. Thank you to this first panel for really putting the framework, helping us to understand what's in the new guidelines and what that would mean in terms of population screening. So thank you to Giampoli, to Zorana, to Isabel, to Annette, and to Cesare, who had to leave us. Thank you very much. Now, for you, the audience, this is your public health intervention, because we're going to take a short break, 10-minute break. And so between now and 10:30, please get up, move around, get yourself a glass of water so that you're ready in 10 minutes when we start again. See you in 10 minutes. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I hope you had a chance, like I did, to get up and move around so that you're fresh for our next session. This panel is going to be exploring where are we now in 2025. And as I explained earlier, each of our panels will follow the same pattern. We'll have a short introductory presentation, and the PowerPoints and the materials will be made available afterwards on the DiCE website. And that will be followed by a panel who comment on it, and then I'll open the floor to you for questions. So you can use the Q&A function you see on the bottom of the screen on the menu to submit your questions. So we're going to have a presentation by Marcis Leia, who's a professor of medicine and director of the Institute of Clinical and Preventive Medicine for the University of Latvia, and the head of Department of Research at the Riga East University Hospital. And on our panel to follow that, I have Dominika Novak-Milaka, the head of colorectal cancer screening at the National Institute of Public Health from Slovenia, Iris Lansdorp-Vogelaar, a professor at the Department of Public Health of the Erasmus Medical Center in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and also Carmen Unguren, the head of the NCD's prevention unit at the National Institute of Public Health in Romania. So that will be our panel. But let me start by inviting Marcis to take the floor and to give us an introduction there on where are we in 2025. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, and I really appreciate for inviting and having me to this important meeting and presenting actually the progress, and in particular touching the activities with the joint action You Can Screen. Just to make sure whether I should share my screen or yeah, okay. And of course, the topic of the progress since 22 recommendations is really much broader than just the You Can Screen joint action. But I will briefly try to touch those issues as well. I hope you see my screen as well. And those are the council recommendations. And as you have heard already today, colorectal cancer is there. There might be minor changes in the recommendations, but nevertheless, it is there. And what is really important that the quality guidelines are in process, and this was also discussed. You have seen this slide already being presented by Gianpaolo Morgano. So the colorectal cancer guidelines in respect to quality assurance will be soon out. So where we stand and how is You Can Screen joint action contributing to those efforts? First of all, the joint action for cancer screening in general, and that is not only colorectal cancer, that is any type of cancer. This is a project that has been funded under the EU for Health program. So, and the overall goal of this joint action is to reduce the burden of cancer across Europe. And as you can see among the specific objectives, under the first item, it is full implementation of previously recommended programs, including also colorectal cancer. So emphasis is really there on colorectal cancer, but not only in this aspect, because many other aspects of the joint action and many other tasks related to higher effectiveness of screening programs are attributable to colorectal cancer as well. And that as an example, I can mention governance, I can mention data collection and monitoring, and as I will not go deeper into this, indeed, personalized screening, and for this we need data collection and monitoring is one of the important aspects of the joint action as well. Importantly, equal access, capacity building, and collaboration at very different levels between the decision makers with the researchers between the countries are really part of what we are aiming at UCAN Screen. And for that reason, the joint action is involving all the EU countries that we are expressing the interest have been admitted to this joint action. We have nearly all of the European member states present, plus also Norway, Iceland, Ukraine, and Moldova as well. And I will touch just a couple of issues relevant to colorectal cancer. First is addressing barriers and facilitators, and definitely that is aiming at the differences between the countries, the systemic barriers as well as individual barriers. It is addressing specific groups, vulnerable populations, and I could mention also that special attention so far has been paid to the people with intellectual disabilities. We plan also to develop a specific toolkit that will be available in different languages for different countries. Not less important aspect is the sustainability aspect, and that is also broadly addressed. In particular, the group working on this is going to provide a tool that will allow to assess the sustainability in each of the countries. And I think those are the places where also DiCE could interact, discussing with the responsible people in the countries, promoting really the implementation of such a tools. Furthermore, also the network of experts in cancer screening and a governmental advisory board will be established as well within the project. And actually governmental advisory board has been already established during the previous summer, during the meeting in Turin, and currently we do have representatives from all the EU member states. So once more, those are the contact points, the potential to be addressed to discuss those issues. But the major objective for creating such a governmental advisory board is a possibility to exchange the best experience between the EU member countries. But definitely that is a possibility of society to really interact and promote this. And last but not least aspect I'm going to touch is capacity building. And once more, this capacity building will be performed in various aspects of cancer screening. Just to mention also the leaders of the cancer screening leadership training will be part of this as well. But in particular and related to colorectal cancer, it is training and audit of colonoscopies. In particular, train the trainers courses. Those are open for all the member states. So indeed, that is a possibility for each of the member state participants, trainers, to participate and further on assure improved quality for colorectal cancer screening, in particular related in this case with colonoscopy, usually being the second confirmatory investigation for across Europe to have really high standards of this investigation. So with this, I'm wrapping up, and thanks for the attention.
Thank you very much. And again, your PowerPoint will be available to participants so they can download it and digest, because there's a lot of really good content in there that's very helpful. And of course, you'll be able to take questions in about 10-15 minutes after our next speakers have spoken. Iris, let me invite you now to speak, and you're going to tell us about the experience of two projects, the EUtopia and EUtopia East, which are linked to EU funding that help build capacity. So, Iris, can I invite you to be on screen? Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, thank to the organizers for inviting me to present some of my experience with two types of projects. Actually, it's the Utopia East projects on the one hand, and the technical support instrument from SG Reform on the other. And if you look at the questions that's being asked of this panel is, where are we in 2025? And what I saw from these projects is that many programs actually struggle with the same problems. The governance structure of the screening programs is unclear. There is a lack of proper IT systems and screening registries that hamper to introduce fail-safe mechanisms to be able to follow individuals over time to make sure that nobody falls between the cracks. And also it hampers quality assurance of the program. And those are essential elements for a well-functioning program. And what you see as a result of this is that not only the participation in the programs is suboptimal, but also the performance of many programs are suboptimal at all levels of the program. That's the bad news. But the good news is that I also saw in these programs and these projects that it is possible to accomplish changes and improve the programs. For example, as part of the technical support instrument project that we did in Latvia a few years ago, Latvia went from a situation where there was at that time no formal governance structure for the cancer screening programs to now a dedicated role for the CDPC for the management of the programs. And as a result, you can see that there is an owner, a champion that feels responsible for the program and is really starting to implement changes to the program for improved participation. So that's one very good example. Another lighting example is from the Utopia project, which is the Montenegro colorectal cancer screening program. And I really want to do a big shout out to my colleagues there because of what they achieved as part of this project. So what they did is they improved their colorectal cancer screening guidelines to be now more in accordance with EU recommendations. They started development of a cancer screening registry so that they can monitor the program, and they've made big improvements already, and they really want to take that even a step further so that they also can include screening history over time and fully evaluate their programs. They have implemented several awareness and educational campaigns for physicians and the general public. And maybe what was most important is they opened an additional center for colonoscopy follow-up for those testing positive in the FIT in the northern part of their country. And this travel distance to the one colonoscopy center that was in the capital was such a barrier that participation after a positive FIT test with colonoscopy actually was very low and almost doubled as a consequence because now that barrier was taken away. So what you see is they improved this, but they actually improved all their performance indicators of their colorectal cancer screening program just during the course of this 4-year project. So I guess to answer the question, where are we in 2025? I would like to say we're not there yet, but the results from these past projects shows that it is possible to get there, even in a relatively short time frame. And I'm therefore very happy, for example, with the EU Can Screen Joint Action led by Marcis, because it is devoted to achieve exactly this, better governance, better screening registries. And for countries or programs that would like to receive a more direct evaluation of their own specific screening programs, I would encourage them to apply for this technical support instrument of SG Reform. And if programs have questions, please feel free to reach out to me related to this.
Thank you very much. And it's great to hear, good news that if initially you looked at different programs and found there was suboptimal participation and performance, that with appropriate support and focus, those could be improved. So we're not there yet, but we're certainly on the way. And also reminding people there are financial instruments, support instruments available at EU level that can be used in a targeted way by member states if they want to work on that. So thank you for that. Let me invite Dominika now to share some experience from Slovenia, where you have quite an established process. And what we're going to find out is how we make sure they are sustainable going forward. Dominika, please go ahead.
Dear participants, dear organizers, thank you for invitation and opportunity to present Slovenian experience on ensuring sustainability of established screening programs. I will begin with some information about our program. The name is Program Suite. It is a national colorectal cancer screening program designed to detect precancerous lesions and colorectal cancer at an early stage. It has been operating since 2009. Program invites men and women aged 50 to 74 every 2 years using a fecal immunochemical test, followed by colonoscopy for positive results. It contributes to early detection and prevention of colorectal cancer, reducing disease burden in Slovenia. In 15 years of running the program, more than 4,400 colorectal cancers have been detected and precancerous lesions were removed in more than 33,400 patients. In 2024, 65% of invitees participated in screening. Participation has increased over time. In first screening round, the response rate to invitation was 57%, but the target of at least 70% response rate has not yet been achieved. To ensure sustainability of the program over time, it is necessary to provide key elements like, for example, governance, strong organizational framework, and institutional support. Program is operated by the National Institute of Public Health. Slovenia have a clearly defined national health policy with National Cancer Control Program. Screening programs have a centralized management with a clear leadership and accountability. Standardized protocols for fit testing, colonoscopy performance, pathology reporting, and post-polypectomy surveillance are implemented. Strong political commitment, long-term strategic planning contributes to stability and continuity. National registries like Central Population Register enabling accurate identification and follow-up of the target population. Clearly defined target population age 50 to 74, systematic invitation system, reminders for non-responders, continuous data monitoring allows rapid identification of participation trends and gaps. Accessible and cost-effective screening method enables free-of-charge screening for those with compulsory health insurance. The entire screening pathway, including fit test, laboratory analysis, colonoscopy, and follow-up, is fully covered by Health Insurance Institute of Slovenia, which means stable financing and resource allocation. Referral to colonoscopy and further diagnostic support ensures a full screening continuum. Removing financial barriers is a key factor in sustaining high engagement of target population. Quality assurance with quality indicators are monitored across the entire screening pathway. Human and equipment resources planning is important, as well as ongoing training of endoscopists, nurses, pathologists, program coordinators, and continuous improvements is needed. Continuous communication and public awareness efforts, targeted materials and activities help maintain or increase participation. Tailored communication campaign maintain awareness in an already saturated population. Continuous public awareness campaign highlights the importance of cancer early detection and report program achievements. Medical professionals, patient association, and media are active partners in promoting participation. Outreach to underserved groups like men, low socioeconomic status, rural area include adapted messaging, partners with NGOs, community organizations, and direct outreach activities. Regular reporting and data transparency include monitoring of participation and fit test positivity rate, colonoscopy outcomes, and effectiveness of the program. All this supports trust and optimization among participants. Participants experience organized, timely, and respectful care, which encourage repeated participation. Positive user experience spread through word of mouth, reinforcing trust. And some thoughts for the end. Slovenia's experience shows that sustainability relies on continuous investment in quality, data, communication, and workforce, not only on initial program setup. Mature programs like Slovenian is must evolve to maintain effectiveness and public trust.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And I just want to pull out a couple of elements that I found very interesting, which is that you mentioned that you can't just do awareness and then walk away. When you've got a population that's quite saturated, you have to keep working at it, maintain the awareness. And you also highlighted how, you've identified some groups that are poorly served or hard to reach who don't uptake it so much. And then you do specific outreach to them to keep working to be inclusive and bring people in. So thank you for that. And again, reminding us it's also about the workforce to make sure that they're trained and they're ready to do it. So we had experience there from Slovenia. Now let's hear experience from another country. Carmen, let me invite you to take the floor and share your experience from Romania.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. This panel is actually hello to all colleagues, panelists. It's like a group of professional friends. Indeed, Romania has some achievements and still an awful lot of challenges to overcome. The main challenge I would actually nominate for countries like mine would be reaching the national consensus on on the need of implementing organized screening programs. Still, the difference between organized population-based and opportunistic or unorganized programs is not really differentiated in terms of clinicians. And this is highlighting the need of involvement because I am trying to put the challenges with some solutions we've identified and some achievements we've obtained. This highlights the importance of the medical education starting very early in the career, starting from students and residents to be educated in the culture of prevention, evidence-based prevention, and population-based screening. And involving the academic world is actually, from my point of view, an essential and crucial step into achieving a national consensus of what screening is and what screening needs. The second challenge that would be it's the governance. Still, the political commitment is only at the declarative stage, but actually steps have been taken to actually commit to implementing screening programs, although everybody talks about it at political level. Therefore, the need for forming a leadership of institutions and specialists and experts becomes an alternative that actually can advocate and put forward the need for political commitment and governance of such programs. And the third challenge that would be, again, this is something that we thought we had at some point, we had it sorted out, but still it comes around. So this is something I would actually point out, that the need for reinforcement and not to be taken for granted. All the achievement and the solutions we have found, they are not forever. They need to be reinforced every now and again. Is the need for training. This is one of the challenges that started to arise in the recent months when several key opinion leaders from the healthcare units and of course at the political level have stated that the training in cancer screening programs is not necessary because there are all simple maneuvers that are taught during the university training and their residency. So there isn't much need for training. We found ourselves in a very dangerous position because such a public statement is absolutely something that would set you back for a while. So we needed to push back and to reinforce and to reaffirm the need for continuous training in cancer screening. And one of the achievements that actually have helped out even to move forward, but also to preserve whatever achievements we have accomplished, is the involvement of professional societies and patients association. They were actually key actors that actually formed a coordination group, and they've actually advocated for political commitment and sustainable financing. And also they were the ones that actually have contributed enormously in reaching the national consensus within the professionals for the need for standards and quality criteria. The patient associations have helped an awful lot. On one hand, in providing information about patient experience and population experience through the screening pathway, which we would have never have obtained otherwise. They actually have been involved actively in information campaigns and also in mobilizing the population. And crucially, they were and they still are involved in hard to reach in implementing the screening activities in hard to reach populations, and especially in vulnerable population. And I would actually underline their contribution in advocating for ensuring equity in access to preventive services, especially when it comes to cancer screening. So these are achievements. Of course, Iris and earlier on, Carlo may be aware about our colorectal cancer screening registry, which is quite developed and advanced and ready to follow up from the very beginning, from the testing to the diagnosis, the patient through the screening pathway, and able to provide quality checked data. This is something that it's well established, but the cancer screening registry is actually developing process all the time because we are collecting the feedback, of course, from the health professionals and from the patients also. So this will be, in a nutshell, challenges and achievements. And I would actually conclude that we must bear in mind that once a problem seems to be sorted out, not to be taken for granted, because it always may come back as a problem that needs sometimes a different solution than the initial ones. So thank you very much again for inviting me and having me in the summit.
Thank you very much. And again, it's really useful to hear about the different lessons that you've highlighted for us. And that last point, I think, was really instructive, because you may have, if you have a challenge that's identified and you find a solution for it a little bit later and you look at it again, the same solution may not work again, and you may need to innovate or try something different in order to keep, it's a continuous process of improvement. And I think you described that for us very nicely. It's not a question of putting something in place and say, hey, job done, let's go away. It's actually to keep an eye on it, keep maintaining it, keep reinforcing it, looking to see what additional training is needed, where the measures are. And your messages were very consistent from what we heard from our other speakers. So thank you. We have about 12 or 13 minutes open for Q&A. So colleagues, please put your questions in the Q&A function you find on the bottom of the screen, and our panel is able to answer and respond to any of your comments or your questions. And as a remember, the theme we've got here is, where are we in 2025? And each of our speakers highlighted some good news and identified some areas for progress. And what I drew from all of this is the need for reinforcement, that you put things in place and then you keep going, you keep testing, you keep updating, the continuous effort. Several of you mentioned the power of collaboration, working with patient groups, finding ways to outreach people who may not normally walk through the door through primary care. So men, traditionally not people who see their doctor as much, reaching out to ethnic minorities and other vulnerable groups. Several of you mentioned the importance of collecting data. So you see what you're doing and therefore you see what you're missing. The importance of ongoing training and to build capacity. And several of you also mentioned you need IT systems. You need, and to be able to apply the latest digital solutions, you need to be working on that. So these are all areas I think you have highlighted, and we haven't got any questions yet from the audience. So let me invite all of you panel. Did my little summary cover all of the key points, or is there anything that I forgot off that list that you mentioned as, where we are in 2025? Iris, your hand is up.
Yes, thanks, Tamsin. I think you summarized it really well. I just wanted to add something that maybe hasn't been mentioned yet in the field of collaboration, not just internally within your country with the different stakeholders, but also externally with other countries, learning from each other, how, especially countries surrounding you. Not a solution from the Netherlands may not work in Romania, for example, but a solution in Slovenia may work for Montenegro. And I think that's also what we can learn. And not everybody, there are common themes, but not everybody struggles with exactly the same issues. So some issues may have been resolved in your country, which can help the countries around you and the other way around. So that, I think, is the only thing that I would like to add to this.
Thank you. Marcis, would you like to add to that? Because you were nodding when Iris was saying, well, actually, there are potential interesting options in other countries, maybe not even your neighboring countries, but that's the added value of having these conversations at European level.
Thanks. This is absolutely true, yes. And of course, it is important to exchange the experience with the neighboring countries, but it's really important to know the best examples across EU and even maybe outside EU that could help really to set up appropriate program in the respective country. Within UCAN Screen, also a certain type of twinning activities of the country that will be delivering their knowledge and that is willing to acquire the knowledge will also be part of a work package. So this is going really to happen, and that is ongoing also in other EU projects. And I really wanted also to emphasize what you clearly stated, that the data platforms, standardized data exchange is really very, very much important. And I hope also that the upcoming European guidelines will be of assistance to the countries to guide really what parameters have to be registered, because that is what we experienced within the second European Cancer Screening Survey, that there were many countries that were leaving empty tables, or most part of the tables was left empty because the data were not collected or the data were not summarized. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Carmen and Dominika, let me invite you to, is there anything you can say from the experience of Slovenia and Romania where you can say, here's something that we took as inspiration from somewhere else and we adapted it and we found it useful, or here's something we wanted to share with other people because we were really proud that we found a solution and we think other people could benefit from it. So can you give us a concrete example of how this kind of good practice sharing helps to level the quality up for everyone? Dominika.
Yes. So when we started 15 years ago, we visited Italy, France, and Finland. We collected information, how they are organized their screening, what was good, what was bad. Normally, what they had, we couldn't just implement it in Slovenian environment because we are different organized. We have different perspectives, different capacity. But this kind of experience helped us to make our own way. So now, after 15 years, we are part of different projects on European level. And yes, as Iris mentioned, we are a good example for countries who are organized or was organized in the past, or we were part of the same country, and we can share the common experience and we can share our knowledge. And I want to add something. It is not necessary to have a lot of money to be always innovative, to find new ways how to contact your target population, because after 15 years in Slovenia, it is hardly find new approach to be so innovative that you will invite more than 65% as we have experience. In this year, we had research on where the patients or target population collects information, who they trust, will they take part in our screening, when the invitation letter will come. And we found out that the basic information is missing. A lot of people who are not yet in the target population, they are younger, between 40-49, they have no information, they don't know about the basic symptoms, what colorectal cancer is. So start with communication on the basic information, encourage them, and then probably also the participation rate will be better.
Thank you. Carmen, let me invite you to share some reflections from Romania, what you were inspired by from other countries, or what it is you've got to share.
The power of international collaboration is essential. I remember we were having some administrative issues that we thought they were unsurmountable and they had no solutions. But it happened and we were kind of desperate over them. And while visiting the programs, the Slovenian programs, I think it was 2 years ago, and talking deeply with Dominika, we found out that there were a similar situation and they're not all that bad. And we can get over it, and there is solution for anything. And we actually found common solutions because for some of the issues, we were working in similar environments. So one of the things, the power of honest international collaboration, because it's not a competition between countries or coordination teams who does better and who does more. It's an exchange of knowledge, and as a country that falls behind, I think there is an advantage because we can actually collect all the good examples and all the pitfalls from all over Europe. So we could actually see it an advantage. So there are specific problems, country problems, but there are also common problems that had a common solution, maybe having a common solution. And I will conclude with something I really would like to promote as a common statement for cancer screening programs, especially when it comes to reaching a national consensus or even an international consensus over what screening is and what needs to be done to have a good screening program, is that the fact that we are talking about evidence-based technology, indicators, platforms, guidelines, whatever issues and items of a good quality screening program may be sounding complicated, they are for people. They are to ensure they're not for us. It's not something specialists and experts insist on, they are for ensuring that people are safe, they are getting safe and good quality services, and also they are to ensure that equity is actually a principle throughout the cancer screening program, the colorectal cancer screening program that goes through it, that even the most vulnerable and most isolated groups of populations have access to both information and the services, the health services.
Thank you for that. We've had a question from Koim, who said, how involved are GPs in screening? Now, we've only got 3 minutes left in our session, so I just need a very short intervention. Who's able to share the role of GPs in some of these screenings? Dominika, please.
Yes, we are one of the countries that we very much involve general practitioners. They are part of our algorithm. So the central unit of the cancer screening program make invitations, send out reminders, we send out test kits, we analyze stool samples, we send out results. But when the patient has a positive screening test, then the general practitioner is responsible to prepare the patients to the colonoscopy with additional information, etc. And then the patient communicates with our call center to get the colonoscopic procedure. So the general practitioner is important part of our screening pathway, not just responsible for patients with positive screening test, but also to communicate with non-responders, because we have non-responders to invitation, to test kit, and also for colonoscopy participation. So their approach, their word is very important for those who are not willing to participate or have some barriers, and they can help them overcome these barriers. So for Slovenian environment, general practitioners are very important.
Thank you. Iris.
Yes, very briefly. Currently, the general practitioners in the Dutch colorectal cancer screening program do not have any role, and we're not happy with that. I do agree with Dominika. The invitation, the sending of the kit, that should all be done by a central screening organization, but especially in the non-responders and especially in the people with the positive test results, the GPs can be very important. And so I'm very happy to hear that steps are being made, that there is linkage possible between GP and participants, because currently that was not possible because of the GDPR legislation, but it seems like we're making steps in the right direction because this is essential for improving a successful program even more.
Thank you. Masters, we have 1 minute left in the session. Please go ahead.
I believe that it should be really a good balance between involvement and excluding GPs, because definitely they should be well informed and motivating the patients. On the other hand, in the case if the GP is too busy, it shouldn't really hurt the target population being not invited for screening. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And a warm thank you on behalf of our participants to Carmen, to Iris, to Marcis, and to Dominika to help us sort of understand where we are in 2025. So we're now going to move to the next panel. Thank you all very, very much, because we're going to look a little bit to the future in our next panel, and that's going to look at new technologies for colorectal cancer screening. As with all of our previous panels, we're going to have one person who's going to give us a sort of context presentation, and then we'll have a panel to discuss it. So let me introduce who's on our panel. First, we'll have Patrick Michel, who's from the UEG, a professor and chair of gastroenterology at the University of Heidelberg in Germany. And following that on our panel, we have Christine Miracle, the assistant of the Early Detection Program for Colon and Rectal Cancer at the League Foundation for Cancer Research and Prevention and Microbiome Technology. We have Peter Sasieni, who is the Professor of Cancer Epidemiology and the co-lead for the Centre for Cancer Screening, Prevention and Early Diagnosis for the Queen Mary University in London and Director of Cancer Research UK's Cancer Prevention Trials Unit. And then we have Carlo Senore from the Piedmont Region Cancer Prevention Centre, the University Hospital Città della Salute e della Scienza in Italy. So we have a great panel for this, helping us to understand a little bit what's coming, what future techs. Take the floor and give us that, contextual framing. Patrick, the floor is yours. You need to unmute, Patrick.
Yes, I'm trying. Now it works. Thanks for Tamsing, for introducing me and for inviting me for this wonderful summit. I think we heard a lot about the requirements of an ideal screening test for colorectal cancer this morning, and about thinking about introducing new ways of screening. I think for a teaser, it's always essential to weigh the benefits against the potential harms and, of course, against the costs in a society. So the benefits, I think we all heard, are quite clear. It's to reduce the cancer incidence, to catch a lesion ideally in its precursor, pre-invasive stage, and if there is an established cancer already, to catch this at an early stage, stage 1, and reduce mortality. And of course, this has to be balanced against potential harms, as we already also heard. We need to reduce potential false positive tests. We need to avoid overdiagnosis and potential dangerous overtreatment and treatment-related harms. And of course, given the increasing shortage of funding in public health sector, this has to be weighed against the costs to a society, to a given health system. And we also heard that there are some disparities across Europe, which are clearly worrisome. I think these three cornerstones, benefits, harms, and costs, have to be balanced, and they have to be tried to be put in numbers, to be quantified. And I think you heard about these numbers. The number needed to screen, to detect ideally a precursor lesion or to treat an established tumor, and of course a cost-effective ratio, which is a very crude and sometimes very tough number, a cost of a screening test and the yield for example, quality adjusted life year of a person in a given country. And there are several other parameters which have to be taken into account in this. Of course, the ideal test has to have close to 100% sensitivity to detect a pre-invasive or stage 1 cancer, and it has to be close to 100% specific, ideally, to avoid false positive tests. And of course, as we already also have heard, we need to catch the cancer at early stage or ideally in pre-invasive high-grade or low-grade adenoma stages, and not only in the more advanced lesions. And of course, to increase the implementation, the adherence of a general population, the test has to be simple and easy to perform as positive, but at the same time, the performance has to be as high as possible. And another issue which is critical, which I will allude to in a couple of more slides, most of the tests testing colorectal cancer or its precursor lesions are cancer type specific, but there are increasing number of pan-cancer screening tests, blood tests, and the pros and cons of these two different ways of cancer screening have also to be considered. I think we all know, and we heard multiple times now, that colonoscopy is clearly the mainstay, the gold standard of detecting colorectal cancer. And the advantage, still in my eyes clearly, and I think everybody knows, it can detect, prevent by removing precursor lesions, and it can observe at the same time and intervene at the same time. Sigmoidoscopy, I think you all know in this audience, is also a direct method. It's a little bit easier for the patient, but only catches the lower third of the colon, the distal cancers. And another method, which we have not really talked that much today, and mainly being advocated, not formally, but routinely being done in the US, is the CT colonoscopy version. In my eyes, clearly not a preferred method. It's also very expensive. It also requires bowel rinsing by the patient, and it involves radiation exposure. So clearly not a way forward for a general screening approach in my eyes at the moment. And we all know, of course, the FIT testing, which is the basis of many screening recommendations in many countries. It's relatively cheap. It's relatively easy to perform. Still, we have some barriers in adherence and implementation. But as we also heard and as we know, it's far from being perfect once it comes to sensitivity and specificity. So there are multiple approaches to improve this and to develop new cancer screening methods for colorectal cancer and for cancers in general, mainly for colorectal stool-based tests, but also blood tests. And I will just spend some few minutes to introduce you into these test principles as a teaser for the discussion. So the stool-based tests, beyond the FIT testing, they specifically look at DNA, so the genetic makeup of a lesion, of a tumor in the bowels. And we all know that tumors, especially more advanced lesions, but also early lesions, they shed their part of their DNA, which is an altered DNA, of course, into the stool, which can be detected by highly sensitive detection methods in these multiple target stool DNA tests. So MTS-DNA, it reads a bit cryptic, but it's very logical. And in addition to testing the DNA, which is really the genetic makeup, there are also tests available increasingly to test the RNA. RNA is basically the transcript of the DNA and the precursor event before making a tumor protein. And this can also be found and detected in the stool, and there are tests around which also try to detect multiple targets, so multiple RNAs shed by the tumor into the stool. And these tests combine these RNAs most of the time with a conventional FIT test and with some metabolite screens. And on the other hand, there are tests who look at the blood. And you all know, or many of you might know, that tumor cells, they shed also part of their DNA into the bloodstream. And there are highly sensitive methods which can detect fragments of these DNAs or methylations, alterations of this DNA in the bloodstream by various methods. And the most advanced methods are called NGS, so next generation sequencing tests, which have the capacity to detect multiple altered tumor DNA. And the cryptic abbreviation for this is ctDNA, so circulating tumor DNA or circulating free blood DNA, which is associated with the tumor. So two principally different, generally different ways of tumor testing. And there are, I don't want to miss to mention, a couple of emerging test methods which look at other consequences of a tumor. And the most hip target, basically, which is clearly emerging in this context, is the stool microbiome. So the composition of all the bugs in the stool, which can be profiled by very high sensitive methods directly, or their metabolites. So the compounds, the proteins, the fatty acids, which are produced by the different bugs in the stool. And it has been increasingly recognized that tumors, also early tumors, they are altering the gut microbiome, and assessing the gut microbiome can be a way of colorectal cancer detection. And on the other hand, an altered microbiome is also a facilitator, which paves the ground for the development of a tumor. And trying to understand the pros and cons of these different testing methods in the stool on the other hand, and in the blood on the other hand, I think this chart nicely illustrates the pros and cons. I think if you aim to detect markers in the blood, this requires that the tumor has already a connection to the bloodstream, a vascular invasion. And by definition, the very early lesions, which are limited to the superficial mucosa level in the bowel, they don't have a clear-cut connection to the bloodstream, whereas the early lesions, and even more sensitive, the higher grade lesions, have a connection, a vascular invasion per definition, and in these cases, blood markers can be detected with a very high sensitivity and also specificity in this context. On the other hand, stool markers, they're shed by the lesion, by the precursor lesion, or by the tumors directly into the stool. And as you can see here, even precursor lesions, they have direct contact, obviously, with the stool. And it's easily to comprehend that these early lesions shed DNA, RNA, which can be detected by a highly sensitive method in the stool. And trying to make clinical sense out of that, I show a couple of charts of a very recent meta-analysis, which compared the different sensitivities and specificities of some of the currently available new screening methods. And here in pink, you see the blood-based assays, and in green, the stool-based assays, DNA assays, RNA assays, and here two different blood DNA assays. And you can easily comprehend that up to now, the sensitivity of the blood-based assays, once it comes to precursor lesions, is clearly inferior. And this number is much better and comparable once it comes to established tumors, established stage 2 and stage 3 tumors. But once it comes to precursor lesions, the stool tests are superior in their sensitivity. On the other hand, which I don't want to miss to mention, there are these blood tests which seem to keep up in recent years, once it comes also to sensitivity and specificity. And one of the most recent publications at the ESMO of this year, at the late breaking abstract, was a very large population-based studies covering over 35,000 participants, not patients, but participants, which have undergone a multi-cancer early detection tests. The diagnostic yield was quite impressive in my eyes. And the advantage of this blood-based tests, of course, is that it catches not only colorectal cancer, but all solid tumors which have a detected DNA profile which can be detected in the blood. Among them, colorectal cancer, of course, but also other cancers where no established screening methods at all do exist. And the result of this study was that by applying this multi-cancer early detection tests, the diagnostic yield of several cancers where screening methods exist, like breast, cervical, colorectal, and lung cancers, can be really improved by 7-fold. And if you include early cancers like prostate cancer, at least by 3-fold. So these are still impressive numbers. And if you look at our question whether it can detect early stages, yes, over the half of these cancers were stage 1 and stage 2. And this is clearly a decent number. However, as I pointed out before, precursor lesions, which can be easily removed by colonoscopy, clearly are a weakness of these blood-based tests. So to sum up, I think stool-based modern multi-target DNA or RNA tests are more sensitive for early precursor lesions, and that's, in my eyes, our ultimate goal to prevent colorectal cancer in this specific cancer type. Blood tests, however, they seem to catch up, and it has to be awaited how their sensitivity develops over the upcoming years. And as a gastroenterologist, of course, I think colonoscopy giving the chance for detection and also for removal of early precancer lesions are still the gold option, the gold standard, and probably will, in my eyes, remain a gold standard in the upcoming years. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. That was very technical, but you described it very clearly. So that was really helpful for us. Thank you. And we said that this panel was looking to the future, and I think you gave us some insight about what's potentially coming. So thank you. And now we're going to have a few interventions that help speak to some of the things that you described. And we're going to start by Christina, who's going to talk to us about the microbiome. Now, in his opening message, Patrick said this was the hip new area that people are working on. So Christina, you're hip. Please go ahead and tell us a little bit more about the microbiome.
Thank you so much, Tamsin, and thank you so much to the organizations for inviting me to this panel. And after hearing Patrick, we are led to an important question: how can we use these innovations to make screening programs in Europe more effective and easier to scale in the future? And as it has already been said, in the last decade, the colorectal cancer screening has achieved major progress across Europe, but we still face two challenges. Many countries face two challenges, and it has already been said, Patrick has said it, we have participations lower than expected, and also there's not enough colonoscopy capacity to expand or strengthen these programs. And for example, we have that several countries are aiming to extend the screening age range from 50 to 74 years as the European recommendations, but this requires many colonoscopies, and some health systems cannot manage that at the moment. So sometimes we have policies that are approved, but they are hard to implement in real life. So this is where new technologies can really help us in the short or medium term. And one example is that using maybe a microbiome-based test for colorectal cancer, which uses the same feed sample that the participants already provide in the colorectal cancer screening. So there would be no extra test for the participants and no extra burden. We could be analyzing its microbiomal signature, and it could help us identify which positive fit results are more likely to be truly relevant. And in practice, this could mean that screening programs in Europe could keep detecting almost the same number of cancers, but avoiding many colonoscopies that are not necessary, and it could be around 20% of the colonoscopies. And this could free up a large amount of colonoscopy capacity that could be reassigned and could be used either for extending the screening range, age range when recommended. Also, we could be focusing on increasing participation, especially in those groups that are harder to reach or high-risk groups. We could also reduce inequalities between regions, and at the end we could be also detecting many more advanced lesions and cancers at an earlier stage. And a key advantage of these technologies is that they can fit easily into the current system because nothing changes for the participant. We are just analyzing their fit test, but making the program more efficient at the end. And the next steps for these technologies include generating more evidence, also modulating the most optimal combination of the fit cutoff and also the microbiome technology based on sex and the age, and to reach a clear goal that to have a more accessible, sustainable, and effective screening strategy. And in short, I think that these new technologies probably are not going to replace, at least in the near term, what is already working, but they can help us strengthen and improve this screening pathway and helping us reach more people and save more lives. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was really useful. Let me now turn to Peter, who's going to give us some information about the NHS Galleri new blood-based multi-cancer detection series. Peter, please go ahead.
Thank you. So the NHS Galleri is a trial of the same test that Patrick talked about in the Pathfinder 2 study. It's a randomized controlled trial. We've randomized 140,000 people. They all had bloods collected at baseline 12 months and 24 months, and half of them, those bloods were tested and half of them weren't. I can't give you any results of those tests. It should be available in the middle of next year. The test picks up multiple types of cancer. It almost certainly has extremely low sensitivity to advanced adenomas, but the sensitivity to stage 1 colorectal cancer was 43% in a previous study and 85% for stage 2. So it's pretty good at picking up stage 2 or worse colorectal cancer. Overall, its sensitivity to colorectal cancer was 82%. And the specificity is quite remarkable. It's 99.5%. So only 1 in 200 people without cancer are testing positive, and that's been looked at in several very large studies. So that isn't a sort of an oddity. That's the result. Yeah, if you're thinking about digestive cancers, the test would also pick up esophageal cancer, pancreatic cancer. But it's a very expensive test. Certainly it is at the moment. The cost of sequencing, so it's based on cell-free DNA and the methylation of cell-free DNA, and the cost of sequencing is coming down. I think you need to think about what are the problems with screening at the moment, colorectal screening. So one of them is that the uptake is not what we want it to be. And so colonoscopy-based screening, which is pretty much the only one that's really going to prevent bowel cancer, is quite invasive. And also most countries do not have the infrastructure or the capability of having that as a population-based screening program. And then fecal-based tests have the yup factor, and there are a lot of people who won't take part. And it's also the inequalities that the uptake is much better amongst the least deprived in the population. The group in whom there is the least need for colorectal screening, because they sometimes have lower rates, and they certainly are less likely to be presenting with an advanced cancer. So we need to think how to make screening more widely available, and just having a blood test, if it could be made affordable, would be one way of doing that. The other is that to think about doing things differently. So FIT is a continuous test, and we use a different threshold in different countries. In England, embarrassingly, the threshold is 120. In the Netherlands, I think it's 47. In the US, it would be 20, and I think several European countries use 20 as the threshold. If you were to use it at 4 or 10, if you used it at 10, for instance, about 20% of the population would test positive. If you were then to use a more expensive test in those people, that test would be likely much cheaper than doing colonoscopy, but it would be quite sensitive for finding cancers. But maybe you'd have to do something a little bit differently. Once in 10 years, you would refer everyone for colonoscopy. So that would clear out the advanced adenomas, prevent cancers, but you would be doing a blood-based test in between to find interval cancers, but also because it's preventing, or it would detect all sorts of other cancers in those individuals. So I think there's a lot of potential for these things to be used in novel ways. The prices will come down. The companies have spent, between them billions of dollars on developing these tests, and so if they're only selling a few tens of thousands of tests a year, the amount they have to charge to recoup those R&D costs is substantial per test. But if you were to start using these tests on a very large scale, then that component of the price would drop dramatically. And as I say, the cost of sequencing is falling. So there are also people looking at proteins based in blood tests, particularly immunological proteins. Potentially those tests would be considerably cheaper. I suspect they wouldn't be as nearly as specific, but you might be able to use that again as a first pass. You would do this other blood test, and you would only do expensive sequencing in the people who were positive on that first test. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, very useful to find out a little bit more about that. And you also gave us some clarity on the economics of this, that it's expensive to develop these tests, and companies will only invest in these tests, which have the promise of being very sensitive if there is going to be an appropriate market for that. And I think that's something we'll come to in a minute. Let me invite Carlo to be the last person on our panel, and you're going to help us to understand a little bit more about the requirements for introducing these new technologies and biomarkers. Please, Carlo, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tamsin. Thank you for the invitation. Well, we have seen studies that are showing new promising opportunities to expand the reach of screening and to improve the accuracy of the screening process. Stool-based tests can detect both early cancer and also precursor lesions, and that can have a favorable impact on colorectal cancer incidence. Using microbiome biomarkers might favor the integration of screening and primary prevention. We could implement, for example, intervention to modify the microbiome profile by adopting a healthy diet, for example, changing the lifestyle. And the blood-based test may represent an alternative for people who are refusing stool-based screening. We have problems with participation, so we might offer an alternative approach, which might cover the preference of other people. But these tests are showing a very limited, if any, preventive effect. Also, they can detect other cancers that are now not targeted by screening. So patient preference and background risk might orient the choice among different available options. But to support large-scale introduction in the population-based screening programs, we need some evidence of a favorable impact of this test on patient-important outcomes, for example, mortality, harms, incidence, acceptability. We can assess the effectiveness of new stool-based tests by comparing their performance with the performance of FIT programs, of FIT screening offered within ongoing programs, and we can use a short-term outcome, that is the improving state distribution, interval cancer rate. But for blood-based tests, we are facing more challenges because they are detecting cancer that are not yet targeted by screening intervention. But we need information about the benefit to harm ratio of this test in a screening population before expanding using this test on a large scale in programmatic screening. we would need to evidence of a benefit in terms of mortality reduction following increased detection of early stage lesion when using this multi-cancer detection test. We need to define the protocols for an effective and appropriate utilization of the new test. We need to define screening interval, positivity threshold. We have to design scenario where they can be used, as Peter Sassini was mentioning. We might use them as threshold. We might triage test. We might use them as a test which can be offered to in the interval between a test to detect interval cancer. We need a standardized high-quality follow-up procedure for those testing positive, because those testing positive with multi-cancer detection test might need extensive, let's say, assessment examination to detect cancer in which might be present in several sites. The cost of the process, including the test and the assessment, need to be evaluated and considered to ensure the sustainability of the program. As mentioned, of course, the development of technology is likely to reduce the cost of the test. And indeed, we have already some tests which are offered into the market at very low cost, some of these multi-cancer detection tests. But as it has been stressed by many speakers, it's important to ensure that the utilization of screening tests as this new test and that those who have were already established is implemented within ongoing programs, which only ongoing programs can ensure the equity and quality of the process. And that it would be important in this case to avoid the possibility of market-driven utilization of low-cost tests distributed over the counter, which might also create harms and over assessment, over treatment. The Gallery trial, which is ongoing within large population-based program, represents an example of an effective approach to the assessment of innovation, taking advantage of the organized screening infrastructure as a research platform to assess over time the impact of the new approaches and to assess the impact when using different scenarios for utilizations. Of course, to take advantage of this approach, we need full access to the data about the process and the outcomes. This access is required to ensure that the evaluation effort can be timely translated into practice protocol, which can improve the benefit of screening for the target population. And this will require some flexibility of some adaptation of the GDPR rules that are now sometimes posing barriers to the utilization of screening data. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much. Again, you've given us really important context for us to think about, some of these new technologies that are coming in and the sort of cost benefit, but also how the trade-offs against, perhaps potential harms, quality control, making sure that we are reaching out to people who actually need it. So all of our panelists have made their first statements, and now I'm going to open it up to discuss some of the questions that have come in from your side. And we've got a couple of questions that I think we could perhaps start with. The first question is, okay, these novel tests are great, but one of the big drawbacks is cost. And at the moment, FIT test, for better or worse, is relatively cheap and relatively easy to implement. So if we start using some of these costs, which are sort of sometimes hundreds of times more expensive than FIT, is that going to eat up a lot of our resources that we actually need for then treatment or other things? So that's the first question. How do we, manage that trade-off? Yes, we need to reach more people, and these new tests are more sensitive. And then secondly, the question is, look, these new tests are great, but are they the solution to the problems that we've identified? If we have problems of, trying to reach broader numbers of people for screening, is it these tests that will make the difference? Or are there other things we should be prioritizing? So panel, these are the two questions we've got in so far. Can I invite you, just let me know which of those you'd like to respond to. Peter, go ahead.
So I think one thing to think about with the cost is how many people you're referring to colonoscopy, because that is hugely more expensive than FIT testing and is likely to be several times more expensive than any of these new screening tests. And so if you're using them as a triage, you may actually be able to manage your costs appropriately, but with the disadvantage that you're probably going to be preventing fewer cancers because you'll be diagnosing fewer advanced adenomas, but you might well be able to prevent the same number of advanced cancers or the deaths from colorectal cancer at a similar cost. And then if you're using a blood-based test, it would be crazy to only be looking for colorectal cancer. And so you then have to take into account the fact that this test is preventing mortality from multiple types of cancer. Of course, it's all a bit conjecture at the moment. We haven't demonstrated for any of these tests that there are actual clinical benefits. We've only shown that they can diagnose cancers. Sorry, Patrick.
Yes, Patrick, please.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, these high costs at the moment are clearly worrisome. But as Peter alluded to before, with increased uptake, the costs will come down. And I vividly remember discussion in the transition between FOBT and FIT, that FIT was, I mean, other scales of costs, but was considerably more expensive. And at least in Germany, there was a discussion. And now everybody, of course, uses FIT tests, I think, all across Europe. And my personal opinion, given the experience also in scientific sequencing costs over the last decade, that the same will happen to sequencing costs in routine tests. My personal opinion is that, or my hope is, given the dual role in avoiding and also intervening and early diagnosis, is that colonoscopy will remain the gold standard, but in programs, depending on the health system, where colonoscopy is not the first step, but a non-invasive test like FIT, for example, I think there Peter's argument really catches in. If you are able to increase the sensitivity and the specificity in early precursor lesions by non-invasive testing, then you can avoid unnecessary colonoscopies, which are expensive. And this has to be balanced, both. And I think then the cost gap of FIT versus multiple target tests might be coming down.
Thank you. And while we are still on this issue, Peter, there's a question that's perhaps for you, which is, can the sample for the new type of blood tests be collected at home in the same way the FIT test can be done? Because that's one of the big advantages. It's relatively easy to do. It can be done in somebody's home at their own time, whereas, these are these, small pinprick that can be done like a diabetes test at home, or do they require going to hospital and a blood draw with all of the kind of complications of that?
Currently, they require a blood draw. It doesn't have to be done in hospital. You just need a phlebotomist. In the study, we use mobile units that we drove around the country. So we took the blood test to the population, if you like. But we want a plasma sample. There are groups who are working on pinprick tests. I think it's unlikely that they will be able to be used in an asymptomatic setting. It's already really difficult to find a cancer from a 2 teaspoons of blood, and then to be asking that you should be able to do that just from a pinprick is asking a lot. But technologies do advance very rapidly. The other thing is that people don't actually like doing pinpricks, so I'm not convinced that that is necessarily the answer for population screening. I think it might have huge advantage if you're monitoring someone who's had cancer, just to look for recurrence. If you could do a monthly pinprick, that might be really popular. But in a screening setting, I think we need to balance what you can hope to do with the convenience.
Thank you. Christina, can I bring you in to talk about the microbiome test? Because in your presentation, you said that actually you can run that test on the existing FIT stool sample, which
Yes.
means, you know, there's no added layer, and that there's a direct link that you can cut up to 20% of colonoscopy. So we can see the sort of, there's a huge advantage there. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, we've been working with a test that is done, as you said, in the same fit test, and it's the test that's done is a quantitative PCR, so it's not really next generation sequencing or another so expensive test. So the price would be lower, and it maintains almost the same sensitivity as the fit test, but it helps us to increase specificity. That's something that with the fit test is something worrying a bit, that we have a lot of false positives, and that at the end, if you can just save up a bit of colonoscopies, it's also a cost that you are saving at the end.
Thank you. And perhaps you can also answer a question about how much we have the right information, because the microbiome, you know, is incredibly complex, and it's an area we're still learning about. Whereas I think perhaps in the blood tests, you know, we have a little bit more information about what the specific biomarkers or RNA might be shed by tumors. But with the microbiome, with so many interactions, is our knowledge ready yet to be able to say, this is what we actually know? These would be the things that we could look at that would show us that, because I mentioned, I think it was Carlos or somebody mentioned that an altered microbiome is an enabler for tumors to develop, as well as a signal that tumors are there because they're altering them. So, you know, in a way, it's like if you see an alteration, it's a signal, but you don't know perhaps yet if it's that something is coming or something is already there. Help me to understand that.
Yeah, well, microbiome can be altered a lot, as you've said, and it can be altered in many ways. But if we can focus on identifying a bacterial signature, so like just look for some specific bacteria that when they are altered, then you know that there's a higher risk of having cancer. Then you minimize the range that you have to be searching. So there's still a lot of research to be done, but there are some progresses already made, and there are some signatures that already are linked with an increased risk of colorectal cancer, and that's where the new tests are focusing.
Thank you. And we just got a few minutes left in this session. So let me go to Patrick and invite you to just reflect a little bit on something that we've mentioned, which is that at the moment, screening techniques have both a sort of diagnostic role and also preventative role, because when you do colonoscopies or sigmoid, you can actually, you know, act and deal with things. So it is preventive. And yet the tests that we're talking about are supporting the diagnostic arm, but don't necessarily support our preventive arm. So can you help us to just explore that? Yeah, great, new technology, new options to fill in the gaps, but how does that help address the side of the balance on prevention?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult view, a general view, basically. I think you always have to take into consideration, if you talk about non-invasive tests, you have to take into consideration the test and the result, if it's positive, being a diagnostic-therapeutic colonoscopy. And that, I think, nowadays remains the strongest point for a colonoscopy, also in the first place, as the best option being prevention of a precursor lesion, which can be easily by a sling or a snare removed, and then the precursor lesion is gone and is not causing troubles in 10 years or 20 years to come. And I think no non-invasive tests ever is able to provide this, as long as we don't have effective chemopreventive measures once we detect a precursor lesion by a non-invasive screening to prescribe a drug X to reduce the adenoma burden. And this is not on the horizon at all in my eyes. So colonoscopy, it's a big argument for colonoscopy, and I think in the upcoming years it will remain that. And also, and only in the scenario where colonoscopy is is too costly for a society, or is not taken up by participants, by the population, we have to talk about Plan B. And with Plan B, I think we have to get better, and we are still in the discussion and the balance between as cheap, like FIT, versus multiple target, and possibly in a sequence thinking about other cancers as well, about blood-based tests. I think this is an ongoing discussion. And in my eyes, I think this is always talking about if a person does not want to participate in a colonoscopy, or the health program does not offer this in the first place.
Excellent. Thank you. We've come to the end of this session. I want to say a warm thank you to Patrick, to Peter, to Christina, and to Carlos for helping us to open the crystal ball and have a sense of what new technologies are coming that could have an impact on our colorectal cancer screening program. So thank you all. And now I'd like to pass the floor to Monique van Leerdam, a professor of gastroenterology and a clinical epidemiologist at the Netherlands Cancer Institute. And she's going to help us focus very specifically on early onset colorectal cancer, which we heard earlier is the absolute challenge to get through at early stage. She's going to talk about the challenges and gaps in our screening programs. Monique, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to give this closing lecture about early onset colorectal cancer. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I will wrap up. See whether we are going to the next slide. Yeah. I will wrap up several issues around early onset colorectal cancer, and I will also add to several conclusions of the prior speakers. So first, the epidemiology. First, I will present this case. And we probably all know patients like this. This was a 46-year-old woman with anal pain and rectal blood loss. And she went to her general practitioner in June 2024. And the general practitioner thought it were hemorrhoids. He didn't do a rectal digital examination. Because of continuing anal pain, she went to a second general practitioner. And he thought maybe it's a fissure, and he prescribed some ointments. Then, because the complaints were still there, she was referred to a surgeon, and he thought it may be hemorrhoids or a fissure, and again ointments were prescribed, but no digital examination was done. And then in December 2024, the lady asked for a referral to a gastroenterologist. An MRI was done, and she had a locally advanced rectal cancer. And that was seen in colonoscopy in January 2025. And I think this is a clear problem of the delay in diagnosis in those with early onset colorectal cancer. And there's, of course, the question, can we then start screening? So what about the epidemiology? We know that colorectal cancer is really a major problem with a worldwide cancer incidence of 1.9 million new cases per year, and about 1 million cancer deaths per year. We also know that cancer can reduce the risk of getting the disease by removing the precursor lesions like the adenoma. And it can also reduce colorectal cancer-related mortality by finding the cancer at the early stage. The median age of colorectal cancer diagnosis is around 70 years, so that's important to know. And we also have shown that we can already see a decrease in colorectal cancer incidence in those individuals over the age of 50 due to the cancer screening programs in the several countries. However, we do see an increase of colorectal cancer among the young adults. And this is already more older data, but you can see, I don't know whether you can see my mouse, but here you can see 1995 into 2050, there is a gradually increase in the colorectal cancer diagnosis among the age of 50, both for the men and the women. And it is estimated that by 2030, among all cancer diagnoses, about 10% of the early onset colorectal cancers will be caused by colon cancers, and even 25% by rectal cancer. These are data from a large international cohort study where they evaluated cancer data. And here you can see colorectal cancer, the colon cancers, the rectal cancers, and the very young age, 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49. And they give the annual percentage change. And you can clearly see that, especially in those at very young age, there is a clear increase of the annual percentage change, even 8% per year. It is a bit lower for the 30 to 39, and it's about 1.6 for the 40 to 49. So really a large problem. However, if we're going to put this in a perspective, and I took the Dutch perspective, we have about 70 million inhabitants. And if you then look to the absolute numbers in 2023, we saw 30 patients with the age 20-29 with a new colorectal cancer diagnosis. There were 131 cases between 30 and 39, and around 500 cases between the age of 40 to 49. About 11% of all colorectal cancers were aged below 55 years. So it is a real problem, but the absolute numbers are low. Early onset colorectal cancer is a worldwide problem. And you can see that here in the dark blue, these are the countries with a quite large amount of individuals with early onset colorectal cancer. If you look at the age standardized incidence rate over 50 years, this is around 170. You can see that it's around 12 in the United States. It's around 30.5 in Australia. So especially in those Western countries, it is becoming a real problem. It's also a problem that we do see delayed diagnosis, and more often patients are diagnosed at a late stage. The median time until diagnosis of those with early onset is 217 days compared to 30 days in patients over 50 years. And this delay has two different problems. First of all, patients do wait for more than 6 months in 41% before they go to the doctor themselves. And that's logical, they are young, and no one thinks about colorectal cancer at such a young age. But also, 67% of those patients saw 2 or more physicians prior to diagnosis. So also the physician doesn't think about colorectal cancer in those young individuals. And I think both of these delays really led to a diagnosis in 71% of already an advanced stage, so stage 3 and 4 diagnosis of colorectal cancer. So we do need to increase awareness among healthcare professionals, but also the question comes, should we lower our starting age for colorectal cancer screening? So then about the risk factors and underlying etiology. Of course, part of the early onset colorectal cancers is caused by a hereditary cancer syndrome. This is about 60 to 25%. It's mainly the Lynch syndrome. But it also means that 75 to 84% is not an hereditary cause. So what is then the cause in these young patients? Well, what we do know is that there is a risk difference per birth cohort. And you can see this in this picture. From 1950 onward, we can see that there is an increase in rectal cancer and an increase in colorectal cancer. So if you're now, the risk of having colorectal cancer is higher than when our parents were born. And we all think, and we all know already, that we do now see that people have a high BMI, people do smoke, use alcohol, don't exercise enough, are watching TV or screens for quite some time, are using sugar-enriched food at childhood already. What is then the underlying mechanism? We don't know that for sure yet, but probably there is more inflammation if you have a Western lifestyle. So now we're coming back to the question, what about screening? Okay, we know that screening can reduce the risk of getting cancer, and also the mortality of colorectal cancer can be reduced. If we look at the 10 years risk of colorectal cancer between the age of 40 to 50 years, the estimated incidence is 0.2%. So this is quite low. The risk of advanced adenoma is about 1.64%. So we need to take these numbers into account. Then we had a question from the audience, but also from the Dutch population. In the Netherlands, we have a biannual FIT program. We have a quite high cutoff of 47 microgram HB per gram features, and we invite people from the age of 55 to 75. So the public ask us, and also the government, can't we lower this age to 50? That's also the European guideline. So is it cost effective to lower the age to 50 years in the Dutch program? And yes, it is cost effective. At the willingness to pay thresholds of 20,000 euros, it is cost effective to lower the age to 50 in the Netherlands. However, and this MESCA model used about 600 different strategies, and they changed the fit cutoff, they changed the interval, they changed the starting age and the stopping age. And if you look at all strategies, the most cost-effective strategies were with a lower cutoff. So if you want to change the program in the Netherlands, it's probably more optimal to lower the fit cutoff than lower the starting age. And you can see that here. So if you really want to have the optimal screening program, this will be an annual fit at a low cutoff of 15 from the age of 50 to 80 years. Of course, then you need to do much more colonoscopies, but this is the most optimal program. And you can see that here on this line. These are the quality adjusted life years gained compared to no screening. This was the most optimal. So 1 yearly, 50 to 80 years. And the probability of being most cost effective, again, this optimal screening. Then you need 124% more colonoscopies. Okay, then coming back to the results of the European Committee Initiative for Colorectal Cancer, as Gianpaolo already told us, and one of the questions was, is it beneficial to lower the starting age from 50 to 45? There was quite limited evidence. There were 7 post-hoc analyses of randomized controlled trials. There were 2 observational trials and 3 modeling studies. And the conclusion was that there was a small effect on colorectal cancer-related death and colorectal cancer incidence when we lowered the age to 45 with FIT screening. There was a undesirable effect. The desirable effect was just a trivial, so that is positive. However, beginning at the age of 45 probably was not feasible due to the limited follow-up colonoscopy capacity. So how should we see that? And I would like to give an example. If you look at the age-adjusted sensitivity of FIT in the first colorectal cancer screening route, if you have a low cutoff, the sensitivity is 91%. It's based on the Dutch data. If you have a higher cutoff, 47%, it is 83%. And then, of course, specificity is important. If you have a low cutoff, specificity is about 91%. If you have a higher cutoff, it's about 95%. So again, taking into account the estimated risk when you are between 40 and 50 years, the estimated risk is 0.2%. So then if you want to invite 100,000 individuals between 40 to 50 years for a FIT screening, what do we face? Well, for this calculation, I took the highest cutoff level of 47, especially because of the higher specificity. So inviting 100,000 patients for FIT between 40 and 50 years, we will detect 166 colorectal cancers. We will miss 34 cancers. It will result in about 5,000 false positive results. So people who have a positive FIT will go for colonoscopy but no cancer. The positive predictive value will be 3.2. So imagine if you're going to do this for the large population of 40 to 50 years, you will face an enormous amount of follow-up colonoscopies that need to be done. So in this discussion, the harm and benefit discussion is really important, as Patrick already mentioned. And the other question is, what if we start at the age of 45 regarding uptake. We know that uptake of FIT is quite a problem. It really differs in Europe. And to monitor it, you definitely need organized programs. But we know, this is also from Dutch data, that the uptake among younger people is lower. And especially uptake among men is low. You can see this here. These are data just published last week from the Dutch program. Attendance rate by sex, screening round and year. And this dark blue line are the women who are participating in the first round that they are invited, so at the age of 55. And you can see that uptake is 64%. And these are the men in the light blue line, and uptake of those men who are 55 is only 54%. So only half of all men are participating in our colorectal cancer screening program. So what will happen if we lower our age to 45? I don't know the answer, but I can imagine that uptake will even lower. So by optimizing our program, it's probably more wise to increase our uptake than by lowering our age. So in conclusion, the early onset colorectal cancer is increasing, and 71% of individuals are diagnosed in a late stage. That definitely is a birth cohort effect, and this is expected to further increase, so primary prevention is essential. We know that there is a small effect of FIT-based screening if we start at the age of 45, but we definitely need to consider harms and benefits of starting colorectal cancer screening at this early age. And follow-up colonoscopy capacity is a definitely important issue, and this is something that is not easy to solve. So the conclusion by the European Committee initiative was to start organized FIT colorectal screening from the age of 50. I think it's optimal for now. Of course, we need to revise this in a couple of years, but we should especially optimize the existing programs, try to make organized programs, try to increase uptake, and try to increase our colonoscopy capacity to further improve the whole program. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Monique. That was really thought-provoking, and your presentation, like all the materials from this event, will be on the DiCE website. So thank you for that. Lots to think about. Let me now introduce Mariana Vitaloni, who is the Medical and Scientific Project Manager at Digestive Cancers Europe, and she's going to talk about the role of patient organizations and citizen groups in shaping the way forward. Please, Mariana, please go ahead. The floor is...
Thank you, Tamsin. And on behalf of DiCE, I would like to thank all the speakers and the panelists and everyone in the audience for joining us today. Your contribution made this sixth edition of the Colorectal Cancer Screening Summit truly meaningful. We heard many important perspectives, from the new European recommendation to where countries stand today to the opportunities offered by the new technologies. All the insights remind us one simple truth: early detection saves lives, but only if people take part in screening. This is why patient organizations have such an essential role. At DiCE, and together with our member organization, we work every day to raise awareness, to support citizens, and to make sure their needs and concerns are heard. We help translate complex policies into simple messages, and we listen to people who face barriers to screening. And we bring their voice to policymakers and healthcare professionals so screening programs can be improved and reach more people. Behind every statistic, there is a person, a family, and a life that could be changed simply by catching cancer early. This is the reason why we are all here today and why we will continue working together. Before closing, I'm very happy also to share with you a new research developed with patients and for patients, the Life with Lower Anterior Resection Syndrome, better known as LARS syndrome booklet, created by our member organization in Latvia, and also translated into English so that we can reach a broader audience. This booklet is an example of what patient organization can bring, practical tools that respond to real needs, created together with the people who live with the consequences of colorectal cancer every day. We hope it will support many patients in navigating the challenges after treatment and in improving their quality of life. Thank you once again for being part of the summit and for your commitment to improving colorectal cancer screening in Europe. And I look forward to continuing this work together with you, and I hope to see you all again next year. Thank you.
Thank you.